Chapter 661. The power of spacetime was vast and ordinary. The only difference was that the height was lowered by 350 meters and the time was pushed back by half an hour. Under the effect of the spacetime power, the noise and disturbance in the backstage of the theater were no longer meaningful, like a farce in a snail's horn. Currently, as an important suspect, the woman in the white shirt was placed in the police interrogation room on the first floor of Aurora Cloud City. The traces of the battle between Tian Bang and Mo Luan a month ago could be vaguely seen on the walls of the interrogation room that were painted in different colors. Bamboo Pole stopped in his tracks to watch with interest. The level of his mental senses had increased by a large margin after he became a B-rank mental user. His range and level of perception were far inferior to professionals like Luonan and Cat Eyes, but he had quite the advantage in analyzing properties. The structure of the building could be repaired in various ways, but the traces of various powers left in the damaged areas, including the soul power imprints of experts, could always be preserved. If one were to analyze it carefully, they would be able to discover some very interesting details. Of course, all of this was built on a foundation of rich and comprehensive knowledge, and it was closely related to his own cultivation level. Regardless of whether it was Tian Bang or Mo Luan, their levels of power were far above his. Moreover, a long time had passed, so he could only look at them with a vague understanding and a vague understanding. For the time being, it could be considered as killing time. Hey, you're so free here. You want me to act like a nurse and bring people around for physical examinations? Zhang Yingying's voice came closer. Bamboo Pole shrugged. You should be content to be an angel in white. Do you think I'm idle? The more I see, the more I want to pull my own out and wash it twice. Zhang Yingying understood. There's a reaction outside? Yeah, I wouldn't have known if I hadn't seen it, but I was shocked when I saw it. That lady in the white shirt. Oh, now I know her surname, Ms. Li Yiwei. She's really popular. We just got rid of the grass stalk, and all the city councilors, famous professors, and fund directors came to question us. So cooperative? Wait. Zhang Yingying's eyes widened. Are they crazy? How dare you jump out at this kind of thing? What's the big deal? Ms. Li Yiwei is the research team leader of a famous laboratory under the banner of the Rainbow Fund. She has recently come to Xia City to discuss a scientific research project with the relevant parties. It is a standard collaboration between industry and research. She is very confident. Rainbow Fund? Isn't it Quantum Holdings Investment Fund in the Far East? That's right. That's really worth paying attention to. As for that woman, a researcher. Zhang Yingying recalled the appearance of the woman in the white shirt. Oh, now it was Ms. Li Yiwei. This Madame Li was quiet and gloomy. She was almost indifferent to the changes in the outside world, which was quite fitting for her profession. Sometimes Luonan was like this. Ugh, she thought too much. She was almost led astray by the silly information provided by Bamboo Pole. Don't say such nonsense. What I'm asking is, are these people crazy? How could they force their way into matters related to the mutation infection? Idiot. Oh no, warrior. Now we can directly capture them and interrogate them, right? Unfortunately, not for the time being. Because you overestimate them. Bamboo Pole knocked on the wall, making a doo-doo sound. His next words were sent through the mission channel on the psychic wave network. I also just found out. Speaking of which, when Secretary He reported the infection situation, he hid the suspected cases that were not supported by concrete evidence. Zhang Yingying's eyelashes fluttered. She switched the chat platform to the mission channel as well. What do you mean by suspected cases that were not supported by concrete evidence? Basically, anything outside the range of the large living area doesn't count. Therefore, aside from us and the few of us, the other people who know the situation know that the number of people infected in the second stage is 22. Yes. Don't be surprised. This is what Secretary He did. Quantitative change brings qualitative change. Subtracting a sufficient amount of quantity, the degree of the situation will naturally give some people the misconception that this doesn't count for much. Then someone will jump out and provide us with new clues and angles. It's a very simple technique. As long as you can keep your mouth shut. Perhaps this is what it means to be a person who accomplishes great things without scheming against the masses. Zhang Yingying stared blankly for a few seconds. She even forgot to use the psychic wave network. Which side does she stand on in the end? Which side do you think she stands on? I've always thought that she was the coordinator of the Star Alliance Committee and the Society, as well as the spokesperson of the burners in the Society. Zhang Yingying answered boldly, but she quickly lowered her voice. I also know that some people think that she's a nail wedged in by the government and the military, a vanguard pushing for the Society to become official. In any case, I've never thought of it that way. But I also didn't think that she could hide this information and deal with officials so ruthlessly. I, on the other hand, think that she's made her stand clear long ago. But it's still too early to say that she's ruthless. The real proof will have to wait until public opinion takes shape and the officials determine the situation. If everything is calm, these people who jump out will only reveal some clues to me and nothing else. Tens of thousands of suspected cases. How can it be so calm in such a situation? Yes, that's a good question. Bamboo Pole smiled. But before he could elaborate further, the door to the investigation room opposite the interrogation room opened. A middle-aged man in casual clothes walked out with a laugh. In short, from our point of view, it's still a personal grudge. It's the new year, and this kind of thing can be completely mediated. There's no need to shout about violence and even detain people. Of course, we respect the opinions of professionals. As long as there's clear evidence, logic is fine. Right. Lawyer Zhu? Some people played the good cop, while others played the bad cop. Lawyer Zhu, who was called out, followed behind. In fact, we still can't understand your logic. Forgive me for emphasizing it again, but your side, especially that Mr. Luo, is completely confused. The chain of logic is broken. Behind him was a certain innocent police officer. His face was full of MMP, but in the end, it turned into a face of business as usual, and he sent the guests off without any interest. What Zhang Yingying noticed was a familiar aura in the investigation room. Although the other party didn't show up, she still made a judgment. Wow! Secretary, he came personally? A direct confrontation? Aha! Then why are you still talking about her? I'm here to accompany you, beautiful. Zhang Yingying curled her lips. And on the other side, Lawyer Zhu was very immersed in his role, or perhaps it could be said that he was very professional. He still tried his best to shout into the room that Mr. Luo's logic is completely untenable. No legal system will accept the fantasies of a minor. He can't explain the connection between a suspected infected person and a terrorist attacker. He can't even explain the difference between a grown man and a woman. Zhang Yingying's gaze swept over the two fellows in the corridor who had taken the initiative to jump into the pit. Who are these people? The Rainbow Fund's executives and lawyers. Currently, their reactions are the most intense. It seems quite reasonable, but there's still room to dig for clues. So that's how it is. But frankly speaking, I really want to give this Mr. Lawyer a thumbs up. Cough. Should I say it in front of Boss Luo? I'll say it as it is. Beautiful, the boss is a psychic that you personally dug out. Dreaming and whatnot is within the scope of your profession, okay? Then other than dreaming, are there other channels of information? Zhang Yingying's occupational disease flared up, and she spoke without thinking. But Bamboo Pole responded very seriously. If there is, then it must be a talent exclusive to the thieving heavenly fire hero. TSK TSK. Zhang Yingying looked Bamboo Pole up and down. Boss Luo isn't in front of me, and I didn't see the light of talent. I only saw a fanatic who was burning with impatience to help him preach. Bamboo Pole laughed loudly. You praise Her Majesty Empress Wu, and I praise Big Boss Luo. That's only fair. What logic? The two of them chatted casually, causing the two people from the Rainbow Fund to raise their eyebrows. They were also a bit embarrassed. After saying a few more pleasantries, they turned around and left. Zhang Yingying made a sound. I remember that the person in charge of the Rainbow Fund is Yan Yonghua, the boss's great enemy, right? That's right, but he's still on duty or on vacation. Bamboo Pole said it casually, but Zhang Yingying's thoughts jumped. She thought of another person whose fate was quite similar to Yan Yonghua's, and she subconsciously gritted her teeth. That black-hearted salt, looking for trouble when there's nothing to do. What kind of intentions does he have? Her mind wandered, and she didn't see He Yueyin come out of the investigation room. Instead, the latter directly walked over and asked, there should be results from the surveillance analysis and secretion extraction. Oh, there is. It's not bad. Zhang Yingying always had a bit of a prejudice against He Yuan. It was impossible for her to respond like a subordinate. She immediately changed the topic. Boss Luo didn't come? Let's get the two of us together and talk together. Speaking of which, he couldn't have his ear torn off by his family and is busy looking for someone to stitch it up, right? Bamboo Pole laughed. He's been here for almost 20 minutes. Ha! Where's he? He found a small room as soon as he arrived and locked himself up. I don't know what he's up to. Maybe it's some sort of dreamlike logical chain of thought. The kind that can kill a person. The single room located in the corner of the police station was originally the office of the chief of the police station. It could be considered a quiet place amidst the hustle and bustle. Luo Nan was temporarily commandeered by Luo Nan. He didn't do anything else. He just wanted some peace and quiet. Luo Nan sat behind the office desk of the chief. It looked like he was staring blankly at the air, but in reality, he was seriously staring at the virtual brain interface. He didn't miss a single detail of the graphics and words. He did his utmost to use the mysterious eye symbol to translate and understand the meaning within. 40 minutes had already passed, and the virtual brain system's analysis of the new element came to a calm and smooth conclusion. There weren't any twists and turns at all. It seemed that even the secret itself was impatient to reveal its true face to Luo Nan. The most obvious change was in the layout of the interface. The analysis of the new element had just been completed. It was just as Luo Nan expected. It was an extraterrestrial visitor who had just been captured and had yet to be completely subdued. It had completely transformed into an official member of the virtual brain system's exoskeleton system. Its position within the system had stabilized. Chapter 662. Following the progress of the analysis, the appearance of the new element became clear. From the outside, it looked like an object that gave off an artificial feeling. Its diameter was approximately 2 to 3 centimeters. Its shape was round at the bottom and pointed at the top. It was like a biological heart, and its texture was closer to that of flesh and blood. It was connected to the host's blood vessels and nerves, and it pulsed rhythmically. Luo Nan was very curious about one thing. How could this new element be mentioned in the same breath as the Wraith sign? Or perhaps it was just the disparity in nature that led to this phenomenon. After some serious thought, Luo Nan felt that the latter possibility was a bit higher. The chaotic and arrogant Wraith sign was still resolutely resisting the analysis and detection of the virtual brain system, maintaining a stubborn ash-gray color. In comparison, the new element was much more obedient. Oh right. This new element even took the initiative to reveal its true name. According to Luo Nan's interpretation, it was actually an instrument recorded in the virtual brain system's database. It was just like the divine binding hoop in Luo Nan's hand. This instrument and equipment was recorded in the virtual brain system as Night-Level Basic Colonization Biochemical Reactor. Then there was the system's remark. The cultivation room has already been filled with XXX all-round stem cells. XXX type culture medium has been set up. The current basic formula is 100% complete. It has been used. The advanced formula is 17% complete. It has not been used. The extraterrestrial words found in the virtual brain system were all translated through the mysterious I symbol through a kind of marvelous translation. All of this was built upon the foundation of Luo Nan's own comprehension ability. There were some words like the XXX above that described concepts that Luo Nan had never known before. There was no room for guessing the translation. Actually, Luo Nan's luck was pretty good today. The system of knowledge related to this biochemical reactor was still within the scope of Luo Nan's abilities. At the very least, he had done many years of experiments following his grandfather's notes. He had some basic concepts of neurobiology, biochemistry, and cell biology. He had a general understanding of the main body of meaning. There were only some descriptions, specific versions, and natures that he was unable to translate. It was because he understood that he felt a bit odd. Fully functional stem cell cultivation? Is there a need to go through all this trouble? According to Luo Nan's knowledge, stem cell cultivation was indeed a fundamental and important part of bioengineering. Especially all-round stem cells. They possessed the ability to self-renew and differentiate into all the tissues of an organism. In theory, a cell could develop into a complete person. The most typical example was a fertilized egg. Therefore, it had great significance in the life sciences. It had always been a key area of research and expansion. It could practically be seen throughout the history of biological science since the present era, and it would continue to extend in the foreseeable future. However, with the current technological level of Earth, it was not a high-end task to carry out the cultivation of fully functional stem cells. The real problem was the ethical substitution products of embryonic stem cells and the corresponding clinical applications. The true problem lay in the ethical substitutes of embryonic embryos and the related of embryonic embryos and the corresponding embryonic embryos. This was especially so for the white shirt. Oh, he was now called Li Yiwei. He was an adult woman. Once the fertilized egg was placed in the uterus, it would be a perfect environment that even the most sophisticated equipment could not produce. If it was purely for cultivation, why would there be a need to play around with petri dishes, culture medium? That would be surrogacy. Also, this biochemical reactor was implanted in Li Yiwei's uterus. Of course, it wasn't a fertilized egg, but more like a uterine fibroid. Most of the furnace was embedded in the inner wall of the uterus, and because Li Yiwei did have a common disease, uterine leiomyoma, normal tumors formed an excellent cover for the biochemical reactor. Therefore, the previous instrument tests did not find any abnormalities. Luo Nan swept his eyes over a series of test materials. Among them were 2 sets of medium formulas related to cell cultivation. Luo Nan looked at the relevant components of the basic formula that he had already used. He was quite familiar with it. Luo Nan even used the psychic wave network to search for it. Sure enough, there wasn't much of a difference between the current technology on Earth. It was suitable for the cultivation and research of stem cells. It's really a petri dish? Alien technology should have some advanced functions, right? Luo Nan frowned as he operated within the interface of the reactor. He looked at the simple and crude functional interface, finding it hard to understand for a time. Oh, wait a minute. There seems to be another place. Luo Nan's mind stirred slightly. His thoughts opened up another system, the assembly interface of the Enchanting spirit light seed. As expected, the new module that had been loaded before was also loaded as the analysis was completed. The situation here. Luo Nan narrowed his eyes in the next second. Luo Nan was unable to directly pry into the internal structure of the biochemical reactor due to the limitations of his sensing precision. He could only use interference waves to realize a link with the device and then use the virtual brain system to control it. The so-called control was just reading the device's information and grasping the relevant privileges of the device. That was all. After all, he did not possess complete ownership and control over the biochemical reactor before he fished it out from Li Yiwei's uterus. Luo Nan accepted this reality, but the premise for all of this was that he received complete information and had the highest privileges. But what's going on here? The assembly interface of the Enchanting spirit light seed was a window to the enormous database of the virtual brain system. What Luo Nan browsed through here was not some real-time information, but a series of original information stored in the database. Since the virtual brain system had already given a name to the new element, this proved that the equipment, the night-level basic colonization biochemical reactor, existed in the database. Reality was like this. When Luo Nan opened up the relevant interface, a series of blueprints and data information appeared in succession without any reservation. This is the same type of equipment. Are you bullying me because I can't understand the blueprints? Luo Nan had been using the Enchanting spirit light seed more efficiently during this time. Other than duplicating the exoskeleton equipment, Luo Nan had taken time out to study the basic knowledge of mechanical design from worker Zhai. Due to the short amount of time, Luo Nan still lacked the ability to work independently in the relevant fields. He only had professional insight, which was tempered by the massive amount of assembly blueprints and data in the virtual brain system under the catalysis of configuration thinking. Because of this, he immediately discovered an enormous difference when he looked at the blueprints and the actual demonstration blueprints. To be honest, anyone who saw the series of functional divisions that included the energy core, the cultivation area, the differentiation area, the modification area, the external docking station, the remote control area, and so on. It was like a top-notch city had been carved out of a date stone. Then they looked at the pitiful little petri dish structure on the other side. They would have huge suspicions. If the blueprints weren't wrong then. Warning. XXX pluripotent stem cells are undergoing uncontrolled differentiation. No inhibitors have been detected. Physical intervention has failed. Immediate activation of the destruction sequence is recommended. Warning: the equipment is 9% complete. It no longer possesses the ability to self-destruct. There is a risk of biochemical contamination. Risk assessment: moderate. Chapter 663. A series of warning pop-up windows and an even more detailed system explanation showed that the virtual brain system had finally discovered a conflict between the real object and the database during the data matching process. Next, the virtual brain system began a series of even more detailed comparisons. It used the interference waves emitted by Luo Nan to make a deeper judgment of the so-called parasitic mutant. Luo Nan was unable to grasp the operating logic of the virtual brain system in a short amount of time. He could only stare at the system's repeated updates of the alien language, looking and guessing in a half-understanding manner. His train of thought inevitably drifted a bit during this period of time. He was wondering if Li Yiwei knew about the unforeseen event in the biochemical reactor. Did she know that the cultivated XXX-type pluripotent stem cells had already encountered uncontrolled differentiation, becoming a parasitic mutant? Well, if Luo Nan were to think further back, did Li Yiwei know that she was a host? If she didn't know, then it would be quite interesting. Luo Nan could completely use this to break through the defenses of her heart and obtain even deeper information. Luo Nan felt a bit like a schemer as these thoughts ran through his mind. However, the distance between talent and thinking made it hard for him to continue on this path for a long period of time. Soon, the virtual brain system's calculation results attracted all of his attention. The virtual brain system displayed a high level of intelligent computing ability. It sorted out the information transmitted back by the interference wave probe and completed the synchronization model of the biochemical reactor. At the same time, it formed another set of theoretical models based on the stored data. The two models were synchronized, and the enormous difference was displayed more directly. The complete night-level basic implantation biochemical reactor was powered by a miniature energy core that consumed special high-energy fuel. It was a military equipment that integrated the cultivation, differentiation, and modification of pluripotent stem cells. It was capable of repairing and remodeling the body's organs, undergoing temporary biochemical modifications, and extreme feigned death to survive. It was a production line that used pluripotent stem cells as a base material to undergo a series of proliferation, modification, and processing. However, the biochemical reactor presented by the synchronization model of the equipment had become an abandoned warehouse that only retained a single cultivation function. No, it was possible that even the cultivation function had been lost. The energy core was gone. Aside from the breeding room, all the functional areas were gone. What replaced it was a mass of flesh and blood densely covered in blood vessels and nerves. The rhythmic pulsation of the relevant areas represented its internal life force. Luo Nan could only gather information up to this point. No matter how miraculous the external neuron was, it was impossible for it to control the real-time situation when the equipment was completely damaged. Therefore, Luo Nan was still in the dark when it came to the abilities and threats of the parasitic mutant. Luo Nan had two more questions that needed to be answered aside from the specific circumstances of the parasitic mutant. Firstly, why did the abandoned biochemical reactor still attract the attention and strong reaction of the virtual brain system, especially the spiritual light seed of Jin Tong? The reason he could think of was probably a misunderstanding, caused by the target's actual situation not matching the database in time. However, the current situation was that Jin Tong's spiritual light seed seemed to be quite active and highly sensitive to the biochemical reactor over there. The combination and reaction of the relevant systems still have to be based on the material plane. Perhaps he should let the two of them have actual contact. It just so happened that the material structure of the Blood Soul Temple in the volcanic area was not very satisfactory, and the energy absorption of the aura seed had stagnated. It would not be a problem to temporarily move it back to do an experiment. As for Li Yiwei, if he wanted to extract it, it would involve the second problem. Was the situation with the biochemical reactor an accident for Li Yiwei? Or was it an established program? Such a precise biochemical reactor had already been destroyed to this degree. Even its most basic energy core had been swallowed up. Why was the breeding room left behind? Why was it allowed to operate normally? Luo Nan could see the real-time situation of the breeding room from the relevant information detected by the virtual brain system. This was the only area he could grasp. According to the information, there were no so-called type XXX fully functional stem cells within the breeding room. It was completely empty. What was truly operating was actually the retention warehouse, which was used to preserve raw materials for the creation of cell culture media. Even though the biochemical reactor's energy core had been destroyed and it had completely turned into a parasitic state, needing to absorb energy and nutrients from the outside world without end, this place was still intermittently and selectively absorbing and extracting various material components that were completely different from the energy and nutrients. These material components were neatly and clearly piled up in the advanced formula area of the retention warehouse. The degree of rigor was simply like that of ants storing food for the winter. Luo Nan observed the list extracted from the equipment's records. Most of the contents were all sorts of strange organic compounds. There seemed to be genetic samples as well. There were some things that Luo Nan could not distinguish at all. They clearly exceeded the scope of Luo Nan's understanding. Even the secret text of me was powerless to do anything about them. I can only see that the biochemical reactor. No, I should say that the fellow residing in the remains of the biochemical reactor is still doing its best to collect the raw materials for the advanced formula. Maybe it wants to advance a second time? It's just that the progress is a bit slow. He flipped through the equipment's historical records and looked at a few key entries. The raw materials for the basic formula list only took a few minutes to gather and completely concoct. As for the advanced formula list, the first 10% was quite fast. But towards the end, the time needed to gather each raw material exceeded a week or more. Luo Nan made a rough calculation. When all the various time periods were added together, it actually exceeded 2 years. Currently, the advanced formula's completion rate was 17%. In other words, there was only 7% progress after 2 years, and it was getting slower and slower. If things continued at this pace, wouldn't it take 30 to 40 years before he had hope of gathering all the ingredients? Could it be that this advanced formula was a so-called immortal formula? Could it be that it required some 100-year-old, 1,000-year-old spirit medicine in order to be able to form a framework? What in the world were these raw materials that he couldn't even understand? The external neuron in Luo Nan's brain suddenly emitted electricity before he could finish his thought. Using the coupling method that Luo Nan was most comfortable with, the flow of information was applied to Luo Nan's subbrain, giving him an appropriate stimulation. Luo Nan's eyelids twitched slightly, and he immediately closed his eyes. It was at this moment that the character me flickered with a mysterious invisible core. It was similar to the large coordinate system of the extraordinary domain. It drove the soul cloak that already covered the entire world to receive the flow of information transmitted by the external neuron. It was deciphered, transformed, sensed, and fed back. The soul cloak that covered the entire world simultaneously mapped the vast surface of at least 510 million square kilometers. These images converged together to form a flood of information that could make Luo Nan's head explode in an instant. So normally, Luo Nan absolutely wouldn't take the initiative to pay attention to them unless an extremely intense change occurred over there. But right now, Luo Nan's perception seemed to be plated with a layer of film on the mental sensing plane. Or perhaps some sort of filter effect was applied. This caused him to maintain a sluggish response to most information, but at the same time, his attention to certain special information increased. Chapter 664. It's been a long time. This is a must-have for grinding equipment in a real game map. Luo Nan was no stranger to this interface. He had a similar experience when he collected the exoskeleton parts required for the Golden Tong Seed of Light. Back then, these indicator lights only appeared in Xia City, but now they covered the entire world. Hey, you're not asking me to run all over the world and collect all of these rare materials, right? This is really a super large project. Hold on. A new system explanation popped up on the virtual brain interface. The general idea was, according to current conditions, the theoretical completion rate of the advanced formula is 21%. Actually, there were still hundreds and thousands, but Luo Nan skipped over them. They didn't have much significance. As for the meaning of this explanation, he needed to figure it out. Could it be that even if he ran to every corner of the world, he would only be able to collect a fifth of the complete version of the advanced formula? This really was an immortal formula. It was impossible to do in the human world. Luo Nan couldn't help but grin. He didn't have any thoughts about the advanced formula, but this fact was really too absurd. But he had to think a bit deeper. Since this culture medium formula belonged to an alien civilization, then it was completely reasonable for materials that didn't belong to Earth to appear. There was no harm in understanding that parasitic monster in the biochemical reactor. Just as he broke into laughter and shook his head, another system message popped up. It was exactly the same as the previous one. According to current conditions, the theoretical completion rate of the advanced formula is 21%. No, there was a change in the value. Luonan still noticed the slight change in the thousandths. It jumped up a bit, showing that there were new discoveries about the advanced formula's components in the worldwide sensory network. This wasn't much. Maybe some corner of the world would experience a change in the composition of a certain material due to environmental conditions. This change would be captured by the Soul Cloak. Besides, the Soul Cloak's global coverage was based on water molecules. It didn't cover certain areas with extreme environments that tightly. This was especially true in the thick crust of the Earth. There were blind spots everywhere. He wasn't an omnipotent god. It was normal for there to be some fluctuations. Luonan was looking for a reason when the system message popped up again. It was still the same theoretical completion rate. It jumped up a bit in the thousandths. Then the system message maintained a frequency of 1 every 3 seconds. It was updated over and over again until the 7th message was sent out. Luonan was unable to view this as a fluctuation of probability no matter what. It was an increase of around 7 thousandths and a steady rise in rhythm. More importantly, due to the continuous changes, the indicator light, formed by the interference of the external neuron and the Soul Cloak, kept flashing. It had already mapped the specific location to the sensor network. If one were to simply calculate the physical distance, it would be unbelievably close. A straight line distance of 273 meters. Let alone the Soul Cloak, the target was within the core range of Luonan's mental senses. As Luonan focused his consciousness, a fellow who was being controlled by all sorts of restraining devices, whose entire body was pierced with tubes, and who continued to struggle and roar endlessly, appeared before Luonan's eyes. Huang Bingzhen. How could it be him? Luonan's eyelids twitched twice. He instinctively felt that this target seemed to be indicating something to him. But before he could figure it out, his ears trembled. He had received a message from the spiritual wave network. It was a friend request. Ever since the lecture started in the middle of the month, there had been countless similar requests, even on the relatively closed psychic wave network. Luonan was unable to bear the disturbance. Under He Yuan's suggestion, he set up a ignore unrecommended setting. Only the friends he had previously added would have relevant information displayed for him to choose from. This method seemed quite arrogant and quite ungrounded, but with his current popularity and status in Jianghu, basically no one would say anything. And then there was his circle of ability users. His judgment and sense of responsibility weren't lacking. This setting really saved him quite a bit of trouble. Correspondingly, he needed to treat the request information that could pass through his circle of friends properly. Who recommended me? Damn. Luonan suddenly sat up straight. The 2 words Wu Zhao appeared in the recommender column on the information window. Her Majesty Empress Wu was indeed his friend on the psychic wave network. It was President Ouyang who had taken the initiative to recommend her to him. However, the two had never chatted on the psychic wave network before. Wu Zhao really didn't seem like someone who liked to talk nonsense. This time, she actually took the initiative to recommend him. Peony? The other name on the information window made Luonan come to a realization. He didn't hesitate and directly chose to accept the request. Soon a call was established. The other party used a casual and lively voice to greet him. Hello, Crow. The familiar yet unfamiliar form of address made Luonan feel quite subtle. At this time, he also remembered that this greeting had, in theory, completely broken the barrier between Luonan and the mission partner. Luonan had always felt that with Peony's intelligence, she should have figured out the twists and turns of this situation long ago. God knows why Her Majesty Empress Wu, who arranged this mission, would do something so superfluous. Luonan's mind spun with emotions and thoughts. He took a breath and smiled as he answered, "Long time no see, Peony." Ever since the incident at the municipal plaza, this partner with quite a personality had disappeared from Luonan's social circle. According to Zhang Yingying, she had accepted a new mission and was sent to the wilderness. Luonan had a few other guesses because of this, but he didn't delve further. Now that the two had reconnected, they both knew the reason for this. Peony seemed quite relaxed. She even had the leisure to exchange pleasantries with Luo Nan. The New Year's Eve gala wasn't bad, right? It's rare to have a venue at Cloud City Water Village, but I wasn't there. I didn't pay too much attention. Luo Nan was an honest kid in the end. He killed the conversation in the blink of an eye. Peony's laughter came from across the table. She didn't exchange pleasantries and just said, "The boss just informed me. I heard her say that you're suddenly interested in the completed business?" It's not interest. It's an encounter. Luo Nan was very honest about the nature of the matter. He asked in passing, "What about you?" "Her Majesty Empress Wu asked you to contact me. Are you paying attention?" Wearing black clothes, hugging a black pillar, taking a salary, serving the master. I really have been conducting an in-depth investigation into this matter recently. I'm still on my way. Where did you go? Spring City, about 2,000 kilometers away from Summer City. Spring City? Yeah. Do you know anyone here? Oh no. Luo Nan just felt that it was quite a coincidence. The volcanic area where he had constructed the Blood Soul Temple's material structure was in the surrounding area of Spring City. It's good that you don't. It's quite chaotic here right now. Big news can break out at any time. Also, it's not easy to pull out a special psychic wave network line. Luo Nan immediately connected the dots to the core issue at hand. Is it related to the aberrant infection? Is there one in Spring City? Of course. Peony's answer was straightforward. It was too excessive. Luo Nan was stunned for a moment before he understood how to respond. There really is? Mr. Partner, you must first understand a concept when it comes to aberrant infection. It has never been a new thing. Even though it is rarely seen in the various large cities, it is a common occurrence in the wilderness. It's not just the first, second, and third stages of infection. It includes repeated infections, secondary mutations, and even cases of reproductive isolation. Luo Nan felt a bit of a toothache when he heard this. The surface area of the Earth is 510 million square kilometers. The 88 large metropolitan areas together cover less than 1 million square kilometers. What kind of confidence do you have to believe that the aberrant infection in the metropolis is just a random phenomenon when you live in such an environment? Luo Nan experienced Peony's powerful and astute words, but he didn't have any plans to compete. He wanted to use this opportunity to polish and correct his train of thought. He followed his previous thoughts and said, "It is reasonable to say that metropolitan areas have strict inspection, quarantine, and isolation measures. After what happened in the municipal plaza, Mr. Partner still has confidence in the government's ability to control things." Cough. Mr. Partner, you just don't understand why the aberrant infection population would explode in such a short period of time. In other words, your line of thought is still limited to the level of an unexpected incident. You haven't considered the cause and effect of the incident or the span of time. Luo Nan was silent for a moment. He was certain that he understood Peony's extremely explicit hint. Peony asked him, "Is there anything you need to explain further?" "I'll continue speaking." Luo Nan was just about to speak when he heard a knock on the door. Then Yuan's voice came through. "Mr. Luo, do you have time?" "Ah, wait a moment." Luo Nan subconsciously replied. "Is it inconvenient over there?" Peony asked him. "No. I'm busy with this matter." Luo Nan still wanted to listen to the information Peony sent back, but Yuan's opinion and analysis were extremely important. "Oh, Peony. You don't mind having a few more people listen, right? The boss told me to tell you. It doesn't matter who you want to listen to." "That's good." Luo Nan stood up and raised his voice. "Please come in." Yuan pushed the door open and entered. She bowed slightly like a professional secretary. Behind her, Zhang Yingying imitated her actions in a very mischievous manner. The degree of her bow was extremely exaggerated. Yuan acted as if she didn't notice the mischievous behavior of a certain person behind her. She spoke softly, "Mr. Luo, the results of Yingying's video surveillance and the extracted secretion analysis are already out. There are areas that are worth discussing regarding the Rainbow Foundation and the LCRF Foundation, as well as the reactions of the relevant members of the government and the parliament. Should we hold a small meeting to discuss this?" At this moment, Luo Nan really had the misconception that he was a big boss. Fortunately, He knew that this was a misconception. He nodded. Sister Yuan, you've come at the right time. Her Majesty Empress Wu has arranged a new information channel for us. Miss Peony, who is currently in Spring City, is introducing us. Let's all listen together. Her Majesty Empress Wu. Peony. Chapter 665. They were all users of the psychic wave network. If they wanted to discuss, all they had to do was pull Peony into the mission channel. There were no problems with the technology or the structure. It was just that the process was a bit subtle. Hello, Ying. Is this how you treat your senior? Sister Ying? You're older than me. Sister. We're not that close. Bamboo Pole couldn't bear to listen any longer. Hey, you have to love the newbies. Women fight. Men fuck off to the side. Did the internal conflicts of the hidden indigo firm reach this degree? Zhang Yingying was overbearing, and Peony was hiding a needle in silk floss. The two outstanding women of the same firm were arguing with each other, but it didn't affect the efficiency of their work. Their mouths were occupied, but the two were in the mission channel. They sent all sorts of inspection videos, checklists, and relevant information over in an orderly manner. They were given to the idle people who couldn't get a word in. Luo Nan saw that Zhang Yingying's video surveillance data had already been found. It was close to solid evidence. For example, the male pharmacist had entered the backstage tunnel. No one else had entered during this period of time, and Li Yiwei had come out after some time. Her clothes hadn't changed at all. In addition, there were video clips of Li Yiwei's actions backstage. She was in an extremely relaxed state before. She had no intention of hiding anything, so the entire trajectory of her actions backstage was clearly recorded. This included the whole process of her changing out of her original shirt and finding a white shirt backstage after she got the news from somewhere after another hunt. This information was enough to shut the mouths of many people. It could even be used as a bargaining chip. Yes, this was what He Yuan said. As for the secretion extracted from Shui Yi's body, it could be used as hard evidence. From a biological perspective, it equated Li Yiwei with a pharmacist. Boss, your ability to judge based on your innate ability to judge is truly a miracle. Bamboo Pole delivered his praise without reservation. This method is full of flaws. It's all because your sudden attack disrupted their entire pace. I still can't figure out how you were able to grasp the clues. Of course, some schemers wouldn't be able to find out even if they scratched their heads. Luo Nan was still thin-skinned. He rushed to divert the pressure. It's mainly because Sister Yuan set up a beautiful trap. He Yuan raised her head and smiled. She continued to quietly look at the information Peony sent. Actually, it wasn't really information. It was a series of public news links. They came from major news agencies all over the world. The furthest one was 12 years ago, and the most recent one was today. Luo Nan looked at the first ones. They were all closely related to the vagrants of the wilderness. To be more precise, they were related to the vagrant laws. The earliest one was a certain city on the other side of the Pacific Ocean, which was the first to pass the naturalization law of original citizens and descendants, as well as the corresponding provisions to help vagrants. Since then, over the past decade or so, major cities had been passing various types of vagrant laws to attract wilderness vagrants into this nominally closed urban ecosystem. For example, Xia City absorbed vagrants every year. Luo Nan even saw a vagrant tribe in the Trigate district a while ago. Worker Zhai's adopted son, Di Wei Wu, came from this tribe. He was transferred through the orphanage and seamlessly integrated into the existing social system of Xia City. Nobody Yueless. No one walk on street. No. Yuan. Peony Luo to minor differences only one. Luo Nan and the general public had long since grown accustomed to this. But from the old news from a dozen years ago, they could see what the public opinion was like back then. The so-called change in expression was absolutely not a simple adjective. Luo Nan calculated the time. He couldn't help being surprised. This was when I first returned to the city. So the debate was so intense. I have no memory of it at all. He Yuan added in a soft voice. The Ability User Society put in a lot of effort in the first few years that the policy was put into place. I heard that the branch presidents of every city back then were security consultants for the implementation of the law. In terms of age, Bamboo Pole was the one who had personally experienced that era. He immediately smiled and said, "That's very normal." At that time, the words reasonable mutation and controllable mutation were very popular. The society also believed that the emergence and growth of ability users were inseparable from the appearance of the era of mutation. At that time, everyone was trying their best to increase their strength. But I remember that there were breakthroughs in laboratory testing technology. Things on the technical level are meaningless here. Peony suddenly broke away from Zhang Yingying's verbal entanglement. She accurately cut to the point of the topic. Bamboo Pole wasn't offended. Instead, he laughed. The newcomer is right. Back then, the truly eye-catching things were things like, firewalls can't replace discrimination walls, technology can't replace courage. Hee hee, I still remember that the entire network was filled with these kinds of news overnight. It was chicken soup to the brim. Now it's all the same. Zhang Yingying approved of Bamboo Pole's words. Indirectly, she also approved of Peony. However, the atmosphere was still subtle. He Yuein opened up today's news of Spring City in the channel. The most eye-catching headline was, "They're walking towards us from the abyss." This was a series of reports. Today was the 7th one. The main content was very clear. It was a vagrant tribe that had migrated inland. They encountered the assault of a mutant beast tide on their way back to Spring City. The Spring City Defense Force went forward to provide support. They faced adversity and hopelessness, protecting the vagrants as they made their difficult return. The report was instantly sent back by a military reporter. The writing style was experienced, and the editing was exquisite. It went straight to the bitter scenes on the front lines. Luo Nan, who was an outsider, felt his scalp go numb when he saw it. He hated that he couldn't head straight to the front lines and lend a helping hand. However, Peony, who had provided this information, used an especially calm method to mark out certain special words and details in the relevant reports one by one. She reminded them to pay attention to a certain consistent clue hidden behind the true tragedy. Captain Cho is injured. The loathsome winged handbat is a terrible carrier of the virus. Captain Chow's abnormal body temperature has already persisted for 70 hours. There are 5 other people with the same fever symptoms. The vagrants also have fever symptoms, but their situation is clearly better than that of professional soldiers. Perhaps they possess a certain amount of antibodies. No one is willing to ponder over that word. It's like a poisonous bug that bites at everyone's heart. The airdrop has failed once again. The medical officer is running into a wall between procedure and reality. He's exhausted. The situation seems to have taken a turn for the better. Perhaps fate can be compromised? The situation is improving. There was no smile on Captain Chow's face. Everyone is distancing themselves from the abyss, but the abyss might be right in front of his eyes. Luo Nan and the others first looked at the written reports since the video data was too time-consuming. Faced with these marked words, he felt both anxious and a sense of alienation that was forcefully pulled out. It was extremely strange. Peony gave them a timely introduction. At present, this matter has basically already concluded. Although there were unavoidable sacrifices to leave an even deeper impression, it's still a happy ending on the whole. At least for now. Currently, Spring City's New Year's event has completely turned into a citywide parade to welcome the return of the heroes. The military heroes and vagrant heroes have used their strong willpower to prove that the mutants aren't invincible, and the mutants aren't invincible. Over at the office, Luo Nan and the others exchanged glances. They more or less understood Peony's meaning. In the end, it was He Yuein who asked, "I need a live broadcast signal." "I can provide it. I'll be there." Just as he finished speaking, a tsunami of cheers passed through the psychic wave network and came crashing over. Peony opened up a shared perspective, synchronizing the transmission of the scene she saw. She was probably on a hotel balcony on one side of a bustling main street. She looked down from high above, and she just happened to be able to see the hundreds of thousands of lights and streams of people below. Occasionally, she would turn her eyes to look around, and she could see other travelers on neighboring balconies. Luonan felt like he had seen the old gentleman on the neighboring balcony somewhere before. He was just distracted for a moment when the old gentleman waved his hand over. "Tang Yi, why don't we go to the plaza and join in the fun?" Peony was speechless for half a second before responding, "Teacher Wu, we won't be able to squeeze in." "Oh my, This answer really caught him off guard. Luo Nan's eyelids twitched twice in a row. A certain bud that had been buried deep in the bottom of his heart was impatient to ripen before he had the time to water it and develop. Even the fruit fell to the ground. He had thought about it before. Peony was a student of Acumen College, and the current president of the Mystic Arts Research Society, Tang Yi, who was known as the Blood Peony, had a peony in her nickname. According to people's descriptions, Tang Yi's appearance and personality were similar. Plus, after the incident at the municipal plaza, Tang Yi was rumored to have gone to the wilderness with her instructor to carry out research. Peony also went on a long vacation at the right time. Luo Nan couldn't help but think about the connection between these two characters. Sure enough, it had come true today. The problem was that this connection couldn't be any more simple, but it had been forcefully put together into a coincidence. Luo Nan was busy with miscellaneous matters. He had thought about it, but he was too lazy to look for Tang Yi's video data. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any surprise at all, right? What in the world was Her Majesty Empress Wu? Who had created all of this? On the other hand, Tang Yi's instructor, Professor Wu Zuanliang, was Professor Pan Wen's husband. This matter was a bit interesting. Luo Nan was bewildered and embarrassed at this time. Peony, or Tang Yi, displayed a rather calm expression. She dealt with Professor Wu with a few words and continued to broadcast the situation at the scene. Due to the epidemic prevention requirements, the team that returned from the abyss is temporarily unable to enter the city. Right now, they can only meet the citizens through a live video stream. My position isn't bad. In a moment, I can directly see the projection of the plaza. "Oh, Tang Yi!" Professor Wu called out from next door. This time, there was no image. Only a chuckling voice came over. "Where's the announcer who's supposed to be your girlfriend? Did I hear wrongly?" Chapter 666. Fine. I'm the one with little experience. Luo Nan felt embarrassed in his mind. He also sensed that Peony, the most important person involved, was extremely calm. She completely ignored her instructor's casual joke and continued to broadcast live on the mission channel. Perhaps this sort of thing really didn't count for much in the world of adults. Luo Nan placed his attention back on the contents of Peony's live broadcast. It was just as she said. Soon, a large amount of content was projected onto the plaza. However, the vast majority of the content was still the edited footage of the report. This should be enough for the citizens of Spring City, who were currently engaged in a grand parade. It could push their emotions wave after wave. It was also enough for professional and semi-professional people like He Yueyin, Bamboo Pole, and Zhang Yingying. There were far too many details that could be deliberated and discussed. The problem was that Luo Nan couldn't help but feel a bit stifled after watching around. He could more or less understand Peony's reason for broadcasting the relevant situation to them. He knew that this involved the political actions of a few major powers. But pushing the matter further back was not his domain of expertise at all. In reality, there was a certain gap between the clue brought by Peony and his own logic. It was just as Peony said. His thoughts weren't able to extend to a plot line that spanned over a decade. Right now, he was paying more attention to things that existed in the present. For example, the tens of thousands of flickering indicator lights on the soul cloak that covered the entire world. Another example was the change in Huang Bingzhen's body. It formed a corresponding relationship with the degree of completeness of the advanced formula. A problematic character who had just entered the third stage of distortion produced an immortal medicine that didn't belong to the human world. What sort of people and what sort of cause and effect relationships might be involved in the latter parts of this? These were the domains that Luo Nan was more interested in. After all, this logic was dug out by himself. Every link was firmly stored in his mind. It wasn't like the so-called political actions. It was muddled, seemingly clear but not clear. Then again, there were some things that particularly interested him in the clues Peony provided. It was the key element that the military reporter had been hinting at all this time, inciting all this time. Distortion. Peony had already pointed it out, but Luo Nan had yet to find conclusive evidence. It was conceivable that it was impossible to gather this sort of evidence on a projector screen. He needed more direct contact. Ability represented a certain kind of willfulness. The sensing system of Luo Nan's soul cloak stirred slightly when Luo Nan's mind stirred slightly. The coordinate system within the nothingness naturally delineated a general direction. Luo Nan compared it to the various actual conditions within the range of his senses according to the relevant information he knew. Luo Nan roughly combed through the information. In the span of a tenth of a second, the range of his senses shrunk endlessly and was eliminated. It was concentrated in the southwest direction of the inland. The city area had the densest turbidity of human hearts. Luo Nan thought of another matter when he roughly delineated the area. It was also in the southwest direction, in the lava at the bottom of the volcanic area. Jin Tong's spiritual light seed was also one of the very important verification tools. Right now Luo Nan was unable to split himself, but he had the most trustworthy running errands. Raven. The connection on the mental plane transmitted information. Rue 1 was separated from Luo Nan by over 100 floors in an area. She quietly evaded everyone's line of sight, silently melting into the shadows. She used a method that most people could not understand to jump from the local spacetime to the cloud world, and then from the cloud world back to the local spacetime. She went back and forth, and the distance in the local spacetime was already 2,000 kilometers apart. I'll have a Moluan get it for you. Pay attention to the lava. The structure of the Blood Soul Temple doesn't matter. It's a defective product in any case. Luo Nan's mind shifted back after arranging this matter. He became more and more concentrated. The range he anchored in the area of Spring City rapidly shrank. He quickly locked onto a relatively accurate location according to Peony's description and the display of the projection. Luo Nan was like an incorporeal god. He observed this flat plot of land from various angles in the void. A large number of temporary buildings had already been constructed there. According to his understanding, the location and function of this plot of land was roughly equivalent to the Trigate district of Xia City. However, compared to the relatively desolate Trigate district, this place was much more lively. At least it was like this for the time being. Luo Nan's telepathy swept over roughly, and he saw a group of relevant personnel who clearly came from the political and military circles arriving one after another. There weren't any bands or flowers everywhere in Spring City, but it was more suitable to create a solemn and serene atmosphere. Of course, compared to these people, the true protagonists were the people who were a dozen or so kilometers away. They rode all sorts of transportation tools and gradually drew closer to this area under the protection of the military's mobility unit. Most of them wore ragged clothes. Their bodies were wounded. They were tired and excited. They were at a loss and longing. Many emotions interweaved together. The group structure formed by them was completely different from the millions of people in Main City several dozen kilometers away. There were also the military and political officials who were currently welcoming them. They were undoubtedly the vagrant tribe that had charged out from the abyss. There were a few soldiers mixed in this group. They were clearly different from the mobility unit that was responsible for protecting them. There were a few people in this group. They were in several medical vehicles that had clearly just been arranged for them. Every single one of them wore somewhat bulky isolation suits. Clearly, they were the heroes who had rendered meritorious service, but they had no choice but to face an unpredictable future under the retaliation of the mutant virus. Some of them maintained their silence from beginning to end. Some of them were chatting and joking with the medical personnel beside them. No matter how they behaved, information on the mental plane would not lie. Their mood should be the lowest, but they were the main axis that caused the mood of the entire group to rise and fall. Luo Nan subconsciously asked when he saw this scene, "This shouldn't be an act, right?" Don't blame him for saying this. Peony's calm strokes and description had long since delineated the elements of a conspiracy within. Peony didn't know that Luo Nan's progress was much faster than everyone else's by a large margin. She continued to aim the live camera at the projection on the plaza. At the same time, she spoke with a light tone. The human world is essentially a stage. Some people like to play roles, believing themselves to be the center of the world. Little do they know that there is another kind of person, the director behind the scenes. They like to lay out the stage, assign roles, and change the script. They change the characters on the stage from mortals to heroes, from friends to enemies, from trusted aides to sacrifices. Perhaps there is a deep scheme of interests involved. Perhaps there is no meaning to it, but they enjoy it without getting tired of it. When the first two kinds of people come together, they naturally triumph over countless people in the world. After all, the vast majority of people in the world are still ignorant and ignorant dolls. They are being manipulated by others without even realizing it. Speak like a human. Zhang Yingying felt injustice for Luo Nan, who lacked understanding. Peony responded calmly, according to my understanding, the frontline defense forces and vagrant tribes should all be puppets being manipulated. I know that, Captain Cho. He Wayne suddenly spoke up. He's a veteran burner. He's a tough and resolute person. Put the right person in the right position, and the right position will produce the right result. Peony really seemed to be acting out a stage play. She spoke some mysterious and pointed lines. Stage directors love to do this sort of thing the most. Relatively speaking, uncontrollable factors are what they loathe the most. That's why they often appear as mentors, guiding their targets to act according to their logic. Bamboo Pole was quite interested in this. He discussed in high spirits, I feel that there isn't just one director on the world stage. Several people rehearse a play. This is what directors loathe the most. Zhang Yingying sneered. Shouldn't they be tearing down the stage? The topic quickly strayed thousands of miles away. Luo Nan was no longer interested in it. His consciousness was currently switching back and forth between several medical vehicles, trying to find relevant evidence. However, the biggest problem he faced was that all the infected were wearing isolation suits, and those things were especially well made. The advanced medical vehicle had also been made to be almost like a laboratory, and the soul cloak had no chance to make physical contact with them. There was no contact, so there was no reaction to speak of. Luo Nan was a bit disappointed. However, he did discover a few more hidden Stage 2 cases within the team. They were essentially no different from the heroes wrapped in isolation suits. At best, one was recessive, and the other was dominant. Regardless of whether it was dominant or recessive, there were no examples of Stage 3 infections. At best, they looked scary. Comparatively speaking, aside from Huang Bingjin, who had been forcefully catalyzed by Luo Nan, the other cases were all recessive. Each one was hidden deeper than the last. Did this mean that Xia City and Spring City had different statuses in the so-called stage play? At this time, the live broadcast camera finally turned to the winding motorcade. Naturally, the relevant military and government personnel had the opportunity to show their faces. Generally speaking, Spring City was still building up a tearful and explosive point, but as more objective spectators, everyone could practically guess what would happen next. He Yuan temporarily jumped out of the live broadcast environment. She asked, "How are the reports from the other regions?" Peony answered, "There are very few official media voices or in-depth comments. Overall, they are still being suppressed. I hope to see the follow-up developments." Bamboo Pole inquired, "What does this mean?" "It means that Xia City isn't the center, and Spring City isn't either. At best, this is a small breakthrough point. It can be used as a trustworthy precedent when the entire trend rises in the future. Spring City is already in such a situation. Although we are already in the information age, due to the historical and cultural conflicts between the various metropolises, it is very difficult for the other cities to truly understand the stories that happened on distant continents, unless an impact event directly related to them occurs." Peony continued to state the reason calmly. In terms of geographical location, Spring City and Xia City aren't the most complicated. There aren't many nomadic tribes in the surrounding areas. In terms of cultural environment, the Far East region still maintains a relatively conservative ethical mindset. This has also affected the political environment. The government's control is relatively strong. They have no reason to use this place as a breakthrough point. Where do you think the breakthrough point is? Chapter 667. Gambling. Or rather, resistance that lacks hope and patience. Peony acted as a commentator on one side and a commentator on the other. Her cold and clear tone was a stark contrast to the ardent scene of a million people marching in the live camera. But Luo Nan was unable to interrupt. He could only listen honestly, and he felt that his knowledge had been greatly broadened. 40 years after the war, 3 generations have passed. The entire society has more or less completed the solidification of social strata. The emergence of the social authority system has made this phenomenon even more expressive. In some of the less well-run cities, people became even more restless. If there's a chance to get rich overnight, why not? You want to turn the abnormality into a normal state just because you're agitated. Bamboo Pole raised his eyebrows. The public's mentality should be more conservative, not so radical. So you've been used, right? You should have a deduction or something. Peony slowly turned around and transmitted the scene of an even wider region for them to see. Her voice, however, was as clear and definite as always. At present, it looks like the direct driving force is money. From the perspective of public power, many people don't want to spend any more money. What do you mean? 40 years after the war, all kinds of abnormal phenomena continue to occur in the wilderness. However, did the nomadic tribes in the wilderness perish? No. According to incomplete statistics, the vagrant population has achieved 5 consecutive increases, and the population growth rate has even exceeded 2/3 of the 88 large metropolitan areas. There is not much difference in the lifespan. Zhang Yingying interrupted her. Hey, the pre-war and post-war generations are far from reaching the peak of natural deaths. But this is the situation before us. Who would care about what would happen 20 or 30 years later? Many people felt that the aberrations were nothing to be afraid of, and the overall situation was not bad. Tens of thousands of nomadic tribes, hundreds of millions of people, such a large number of people served as lab rats, living in a region with high incidence of abnormalities for decades. They don't show any signs of perishing and are even very prosperous. So why do they view them as ferocious tigers and venomous snakes and spend trillions of dollars every year to guard against them? There are also many people who think that with the arrival of the era of distortion, the genetic environment on Earth will change, and large-scale genetic pollution is almost inevitable. Large-scale expenses every year could only push back the time by a few decades at most, a generation or two. Since this is the case, what's the point of working hard now? Bamboo Pole snorted, then sighed. That's a mutation after all. In this era, the economy is the economy of eyeballs, and politics is the politics of eyeballs. Without eyeballs, there would be nothing. For some people, the strategy developed in the early days after the war was too old-fashioned. According to the old rules of the past, throwing a huge amount of social investment into a place that everyone was used to and insensitive to did not conform to the current rules. They need to invest their money in areas that have more room for growth and more influence. Facing the distortion, coexisting with the distortion, turning it into a controllable and usable positive element, regardless of whether it can be truly realized or not. For politicians, this statement is dazzling enough to convert votes. For businessmen, it's eye-catching enough to create a whole new consumer market. Since that's the case, why not? What's more, be it politicians or businessmen, they are also members of the public. They also have a corresponding sense of crisis and gambling mentality. Whether it was the inner world or the burners, these special elements that had never appeared in the past hundreds or thousands of years were constantly infiltrating the global governance system and obtaining an increasingly important position. How many people could remain calm in the face of all this? The worst that can happen when a mutation is introduced is to slightly bring forward the inevitable trouble. Normally, a new balance can be formed. At the most ideal, they can practically control and possess this power. Why wouldn't they do this sort of gamble where there is practically no loss? Luonan basically understood Peony's explanation. This set of analysis was extremely insightful. But did she mean to say that the current situation was already a surging tide that could not be reversed? Luonan didn't really like this conclusion. It wasn't that he had any discrimination against the mutation, but he didn't like the people who controlled everything from behind, even though he didn't really understand this person or the exact identity of this group of people. Luonan also wanted to ponder deeply, but it was a bit beyond the scope of his ability. He Yuan and the others' level of analysis should far exceed his. So he wanted to hear more discussion. Something unexpected suddenly happened to the fleet of vehicles that had arrived at the live broadcast area at this time. It attracted his attention. A bit of chaos had occurred in a corner of the fleet. The reason was that a certain military hero who had been infected with the mutation virus had fainted. Under the expression of the visible mutation, that person's state had clearly fallen into an irreversible abyss. It was impossible for this military hero to participate in the welcoming ceremony in such a state. The medical vehicle that carried him immediately accelerated, leaving the fleet and speeding in a different direction. Luonan's mind stirred, and his telepathic thoughts locked onto the medical vehicle. It was clearly impossible to perform emergency treatment on a patient on the verge of death with a layer of isolation clothing separating them. Luonan anchored his telepathic thoughts once more. He didn't even have time to transmit the image back before the special coating formed by the interference of the external neuron reacted. A new indicator light lit up. There were too many relevant components, and the area within the medical vehicle was even filled with a blazing light. Hiss! This change was truly unexpected. Luo Nan gasped in surprise as the corresponding system windows appeared one after the other. The theoretical completion rate of the advanced formula soared at a steady rate. In a short few seconds, the infected person's contribution to the formula had already surpassed Huang Bingzhen's, causing the relevant value to jump up by 2 points. Just like this, it matched up with Huang Bingzhen's side. Luo Nan clenched his fist in secret. This reaction didn't quite conform to the standards of morality. After all, one was a hero on the verge of death, and the other was a despicable and lecherous worm. But in terms of logic in his field of expertise, there was no difference in the nature of the two. Though he said this, Luo Nan's telepathic thoughts spun around in the medical vehicle. He saw the state of the military hero, and how could his heart not be moved? The tower-like man had already been imprisoned within the sterile tent. Right now he was coughing up large mouthfuls of blood, and his throat emitted a hoarse sound of leaking air. His rock-hard muscles had shriveled substantially, and the majority of his body's energy reserves had been devoured by the mutation process. This was a painful process. The stimulation of the body was secondary. The despair towards the future and the distorted illusions brought about by the mutation itself on the mental plane were enough to cause the free will that humans were so proud of to completely collapse. Luo Nan was able to ignore and even take the initiative to guide Huang Bingzhen's related processes because he felt that Huang Bingzhen's mental world was completely worthless. But now that he was facing Huang Bingzhen, he felt quite uncomfortable in his heart. He just wanted to cut off his telepathic thoughts. But just as his telepathic thoughts were about to leave, his mind was suddenly subtly stirred. He didn't realize what was going on for a time. His consciousness stagnated for half a second, and it was also at this moment that a corner of the densely packed indicator lights within the medical vehicle extinguished. Though the patient had already taken off the isolation suit, the surrounding area was still equipped with a sterile tent. This provided a very good concealment effect. For a short period of time, no germs would leak out. At the very least, the few raw materials listed in the advanced formula were all enclosed within this area. They were extremely concentrated. But during the half a second that Luo Nan's consciousness stagnated, there were a few corresponding indicator lights that suddenly disappeared without a trace. Within the virtual brain system, the complete degree of the advanced formula of the medium was displayed. There were no changes. The relevant data only reflected the problem of having or not having it. There were no requirements for the quantity to increase or decrease. But the indicator lights continuously extinguished. It was too strange. Was it because the germs, raw materials, and so on were exposed to the air? Was it because they weren't able to adapt to the environment? But the other raw materials of the same type were clearly still perfectly fine. Luo Nan naturally shifted his consciousness to the area where the indicator lights were extinguished. Similar situations continued to occur during this period of time. Fortunately, after a few seconds of inspection, Luo Nan shrunk his range once more. He focused on the edge of the treatment bed, on a certain rescue worker. After observing for a few more seconds, Luo Nan really wanted to say to this person, "Hey, your isolation suit has a tear." Yes, this rescue worker had been busy all this time. The isolation suit on his body wasn't completely sealed. A portion of his skin was separated by a thin, breathable undergarment. It was exposed to the air. No one would pay attention to this sort of detail in the midst of all this chaos. In theory, his self-contained defense system should have alerted him, but it didn't. Luo Nan believed that this was most likely due to this person taking the initiative to turn it off. This irregular operation caused the person's exposed undergarment to transform into a net. It swayed a few times in an environment brimming with fatal threats, and it was covered in the blood and saliva of the infected person coughing up. There were also skin tissues stripped off from the rescue, and so on. There might even be floating germs and other special compounds. Was this person courting death? Clearly not. From Luo Nan's perspective, this person was simply using a speed that could be seen with his eyes to collect the things that were covered in the grid. No, he was sucking them into a deeper layer. Luo Nan raised the precision of his observation to the highest level. He only vaguely discovered something through the concealment of the clothes. It was this person. Some hairs were bizarrely retracting in and out from the pores of his skin. They could stretch out 2 to 3 centimeters at their longest. They were like slender probes. They interacted with the contaminated things on the undergarment. Then they rapidly extracted a portion of the miscellaneous substances from the hairs. They were even refined. Only then did they pass through the hollow pipes of the hairs to be absorbed into the body. It was as if there was another person hiding under the skin of this medical worker, carrying out a series of precise operations. Or perhaps it was a monster. No matter what it was, they were only interested in the raw materials of the advanced formula. Luonan couldn't help but associate this with Xia City, with the sarcoma parasitic within Li Yiwei's womb. One was hidden within, and the other was exposed outside. If their functions were pieced together according to their goals, everything would become a matter of course. Gathering raw materials and storing them. Chapter 668. Luonan's palms were slightly sweaty. The entire process he had witnessed was truly horrifying. It was like a stimulant that directly injected into his thoughts. It made him uncontrollably make associations and comparisons. He didn't waste time and energy to observe. His thoughts jumped back to Xia City and cut into the virtual brain's interface. He used the limited senses here to observe the remains of the biochemical reactor within Li Yiwei's womb. He looked at the changes in the state of the parasitic mutant. In particular, the densely packed veins and nerves. Luonan matched them one by one with the remaining structures of the breeding room. He also tried to use his half-baked anatomy to analyze the corresponding external direction. The more he analyzed, the more certain he became. It's the same. The two sides should be the same. A preliminary conclusion was reached. The manipulator behind the scenes had kept the cultivation room of the biochemical reactor wreckage as a warehouse to store the raw materials for the advanced formula. And no matter what the future of the aberration was, at least for now, it was searching for and absorbing the relevant raw materials for the advanced formula in the external world through the host's body and through its wonderful biological instincts. Having one such parasitic mutant was stimulating enough. But who would have thought that 2,000 kilometers away, there was actually another of the same species. This one was even more active and was carrying out the same work. The biochemical reactor of an extraterrestrial civilization. The parasitic mutant that had uncontrollably differentiated within the body of the reactor. The same structure and functional pattern. If this was a coincidence, then wasn't this world a bit too inconceivable? Luonan wanted to know, no matter what, just how many of these similar things were out there. Well, Luonan still lacked a crucial piece of evidence. His soul cloak was limited by its physical properties and precision. It was impossible for it to penetrate the opponent's body and give the opponent an X-ray. He lacked a final hammer. He was unable to confirm whether or not the two targets 2,000 kilometers away were completely the same. He also lacked an understanding of their characteristics and nature. What should he do? After thinking it over, the most direct and ideal method was to use the interference waves formed by the external neuron. As long as he sent the interference waves over, everything would be clear. However, the interference waves ultimately needed to propagate on the material plane. They obeyed the physical laws of space and time. This kind of propagation would inevitably consume a corresponding amount of energy. For example, Luonan's method of dealing with Li Yiwei was only a few hundred meters away. Everything was fine, but a distance of several thousand kilometers. Luonan used the virtual brain system to clearly understand the relevant physical properties of interference waves. He even calculated the structure of the soul cloak, automatically forming a simple model. The results of his calculations weren't ideal. This interference wave was not an electromagnetic wave, so it was difficult to use the ionosphere to reflect it. Even with the soul cape interfering with the water molecular structure, even if it was directional conduction, even if there was no need to calculate the feedback, it would still require a transmission power of at least 20 kilowatts for a long time, which was basically equivalent to a mobile signal tower. Luonan pondered seriously for a moment. Everything else was easy to handle. For example, although the structure of the interference wave conduction was complex, there was a corresponding template within the virtual brain system. It could be used with a bit of modification. The soul cloak, which was spread all over the world, could basically be used as a transmission medium, saving a lot of effort. Luonan could casually find several hundred to 1,000 of these 20 kilowatts of similar power in the large living area. But this was all built upon the foundation of a complete energy center's hardware. If it was a single person, if they really wanted to launch it, based on the corresponding structure, the movement would probably be quite exaggerated. Let's stop here for now. Luonan certainly needed to get to the bottom of the matter of the harvester. Then he could only make a swap. He couldn't count on it from 2,000 kilometers away. It shouldn't be a problem if it was close at hand, right? By the time Luonan's attention was drawn to the new situation and new problems, the live broadcast had officially begun over at Spring City. The sense of ceremony and solemnity of the live broadcast was very good. Whether it was the professional politicians or the participants who had personal feelings, their emotions were in place, and they were relatively restrained. An enormous tension was formed from this. There were a few moments when the millions upon millions of marching troops were actually deathly silent. Even He Yuan and the others, who were watching the live broadcast from 2,000 kilometers away, had solemn expressions. Only Luonan was unable to blend into all of this no matter what. From his perspective, the reality of the world he saw was perhaps more direct than the political explanation. But how should he explain and verify all of this to others? There should be a more direct beneficiary. He Yuan suddenly spoke when the short live broadcast was nearing its end. In the current society, before a complete concept is formed in the minds of the politicians, there will usually be a more direct interest group. They will obtain early profits from this. Then they will throw the mess to their blind followers, as well as the vast majority of the world's silent people. Over at the office, even Luonan, who was racking his brains, was pricked by this sharp and extreme way of speaking. He raised his head in astonishment. Shouldn't this be the way Zhang Yingying or Bamboo Pole would describe it? Suddenly hearing it from He Yuan's mouth really gave people a fright. Perhaps it was because she wasn't familiar with it, but Peony seemed to be quite used to it. She maintained the angle of the live broadcast and gave a response in the first instance. If there is such an interest group, then the greatest suspect is certainly the person who proposed the concept of controllable distortion and the fellow who displayed this possibility. But I don't believe that there's any need to find this group. Even if it's according to your theory, they should have already succeeded and retreated. He Yuan just asked, "Are there any suspects?" "There are. And there are two of them." Zhang Yingying snorted with laughter. "Quantum Corporation is definitely one of them. The Rainbow Fund is jumping around quite happily today. That Li Yiwei is also a member of their system." "That's right. One of them is Quantum Corporation. They support the Apocalypse Laboratory with all their might. They have engaged in the development of the human body's potential, genetic engineering, distortion theory, and other related fields of research for many years. They have accumulated abundant technology. A bit of it leaked to Deep Blue Laboratory, and it perfectly combined with the archetype format, completely paving the path of the burners. Technically speaking, they are the most suspicious." Luonan's cheeks twitched a bit when he heard the words archetype format. However, his attention was still focused on the Apocalypse Laboratory. This mysterious laboratory didn't have a great reputation among ordinary people, but it was a key existence that was circled in the intelligence data of the upper echelons of the inner world. Peony didn't continue. Instead, she jumped to another suspicious direction. As for the other one, the gene exchange, Bamboo Pole and Zhang Yingying spoke in unison. "Luo Yuan." "Yes." According to the intelligence, Mr. Luo Yuan, who just rose to prominence not too long ago, has continuously absorbed several large investments. His business is flourishing, and his status is rising with it. So much so that the partner of our school's scientific research activity this time is this person. I heard that my teacher has met him before. They have some friendly relations in the past. Ah! Luo Yuan is in Spring City. Luonan truly jumped in fright. He had once met and exchanged blows with this Luo Yuan. He had even been put into a very sorry state by the planar crossbow. Luo Yuan was truly the greatest enemy of his life. However, on the level of society in the secular world, Luonan suddenly discovered that Luo Yuan was so close to him. This truly exceeded his imagination. It seems to be a long-distance communication. We can't confirm his location at the moment. Is that so? Luonan's brows furrowed. Just this alone was quite astonishing. This person gave him an extremely deep impression. Because of this, Luonan felt a dense sense of crisis. Luonan saw that Peony and the others still wanted to continue discussing in general, doing some situation analysis and the like. In the end, he couldn't help but speak. Isn't there a more direct goal? Peony didn't understand his words for a time. Direct goal? From beginning to end, Luo Nan's mind was anchored to the harvester that was several dozen meters away. This truly bizarre device was more persuasive than 10,000 words. Deducing the cause from the result naturally formed a complete logic. He worked hard to choose his words, trying to make his meaning clearer. Designing the stage and fiddling with society are admittedly very high-end operations. But for some people, aren't they taking too many detours? Perhaps there really is such a grand scheme that takes 10 years to complete, but let's not pay too much attention to it for now. We should be able to dig out some details from the current situation of Xia City and Spring City. Luo Nan's ability to express himself was truly terrible. These words were practically the same as tossing aside the main topic of Peony's discussion. He had already offended people under normal circumstances. Even Zhang Yingying quietly rolled her eyes, but he was completely unaware of it. Peony was quite aloof. She even had the leisure to ask. For example, the contact between Li Yiwei and Huang Bingzhen. The push before the distortion. This already exists. But after the distortion, they still haven't made contact. Clearly, this is due to our interference. If we can see their current performance after they meet, we should be able to gain something. Especially Li Yiwei. Actually, Luo Nan didn't mean to deny Peony's words. On the contrary, he was able to grasp the manipulator behind the scenes more clearly after some discussion. He had dealt with Luo Yuan before, and he was an old adversary of Quantum Corporation. Now that he had a general direction and his soul cape sensing network that covered the entire world, he had a great chance of following the clues to the melon as long as he was able to strike the key material evidence. He would understand the entire situation. His ability to express himself was hopelessly clumsy, but he wasn't stupid. As time passed, his thoughts gradually progressed, and his mind became clearer and clearer. It didn't matter if the enemy had planned this long ago, or if Huang Bingzhen had acted on his own. The intense hostility that came from the mental plane was extremely targeted. It wouldn't lie. Starting with Xu Yi meant that Moya was only a paper-thin distance away. This was a real threat to him, to his family. Since there was a real threat, then there must be a real source of danger. Then finding it and eliminating it was the most realistic consideration. As for the general trend, it was only for reference. Nothing else mattered. Luo Nan's 10 fingers intertwined, and his elbows rested on the table. His lips covered the space between his thumb and forefinger. His voice was a bit muffled, but his meaning was firm and unshakable. Chapter 669. He Weiyin, Zhang Yingying, and Bamboo Pole shifted their gazes over to focus on Luo Nan. Luo Nan had played the role of a listener and a learner since the start of the small meeting. But when he really put forward a suggestion, his authority naturally leaped to the highest level. This method is feasible. Bamboo Pole was the first to respond. He even gave his theoretical support. Li Yiwei is a woman of few words. Her mouth is hard to pry open. Perhaps it's more reliable to observe her reactions under special circumstances. I believe in the boss's observation and judgment. If we can use this to dig out the details and know the enemy's specific methods, then it will be good to counter each move as it comes. Then I'll go get the person. Zhang Yingying simply stood up and expressed her position. She mocked her competitor in passing. We need to analyze the situation, but we can't be lacking in practical testing. Peony stopped the live broadcast. She calmly stated, going against the flow of the general trend will most likely not lead to a good result. The Ability User Society has always been quite active on the issue of distortion. It would be best if they could continue to maintain it. As for the conflict in the details, it has nothing to do with the matter of my report. Peony paused for a moment before saying, I've pretty much explained the current situation. It's just a foolish opinion. It's for reference only. Everyone wants to carry out the operation. I wish you all the best. If you have any problems, contact me at any time. Peony had been recommended by Her Majesty Empress Wu to report the situation. No matter how ignorant Luo Nan was, he still knew the basic courtesy. He rushed to express his thanks in the mission channel. You're welcome. But Mr. Partner, please allow me to say one more thing. Don't be in a hurry to take a stand. You should make your attitude clear as soon as possible. All right. I won't disturb your work. See you later. The call ended. Luo Nan was truly confused this time. Stance and attitude. What was that again? Then he heard Bamboo Pole sigh. What an intelligent beauty. Have you seen her before? You said she's a beauty? Hee hee. I can confirm it just by looking at your jealousy and the boss's expression. Hey, stop messing around. The boss has already given his orders. Let's take advantage of the fact that the pressure from all sides hasn't reached their peak. Let's finish this test first. Luo Nan approved of this point. Since he was unable to understand Peony's suggestion, he set it aside for the time being. He wholeheartedly considered the following test. When they meet, they need to make direct contact. They can't be separated by protective clothing. Luo Nan's words were clearly against the rules. Although mutated infected people had never happened, and theoretically, it was impossible for a situation like droplet infection to occur, in a public place, it would still be quite eye-catching and easy to be criticized. Let's do it in the treatment room. Let them confront each other. He Yueyin made the final decision. How could Huang Bingjin, who had basically lost his consciousness, confront him? Everyone was well aware of this, but no one had any objections. Just like this, Bamboo Pole and Zhang Yingying went to arrange for the person to be picked up, while He Yueyin and Luo Nan went to the treatment room to wait. When he went out, Qin Ikuan and God followed him and continued to perform their duties. On the way, Luo Nan couldn't help but express his thanks once more. I've troubled you, Sister Yueyin. He Yueyin shook her head slightly. You're the one who's going to trouble me. You're undertaking work outside of teaching and research. However, capable people do more work. Depending on how the situation develops, there might be more situations like this in the future. Will the situation get worse and worse? It's not that bad. It's just a temporary integration of the unfinished chaos. On the scale of the universe, it's not that significant. But if it's always like this, it'll probably be meaningless in the future. Luo Nan blinked. Sister Yueyin, why did you learn from Peony and start being mysterious? Oh my Yueyin. Sister. You're still hopelessly pessimistic after so many years. What's the point? You still have me. This tone, Tian Bang. A certain reserved node within Luo Nan's sensing network suddenly radiated a scorching radiance along with these words. And the distance was so close that it made Luo Nan feel a bit oppressed. Tian Bang beamed as he stood out from the corner up ahead. He waved at the two. It would be hard for people to believe purely based on first impressions. This seemingly young and unreliable man was actually a major general of the military with true authority. He even had the reputation of being the #1 person beneath the extraordinary. Truth be told, Luo Nan really admired this person, but he never liked the tone of his voice. In particular, his attitude of clearly pursuing He Yueyin made Luo Nan feel a subtle feeling of offense in his heart. Tian Bang's appearance here wasn't strange. Luo Nan felt that he had come too late when compared to the seriousness of the situation. He Yueyin left him a message in the mission channel at this time. Tian Bang only knows of 22 cases of mutant infection. Luo Nan understood in an instant. He had a yardstick in his mind. In the end, he was an outsider. Tian Bang, this outsider, was quite close to Luo Nan. Hello, Chief Luo. I'm very sorry for my suggestion the other day. Aha. I should have considered your attribute as the center of the hurricane. Aside from gathering trouble, you should have caused many things to deviate from the established track. Look, half the night hasn't passed yet, but I can't see any elements related to the Blood Intent Ring's fortress. This should be considered a kind joke. At least this was what it showed on the mental plane. But Luo Nan couldn't find a way to respond other than twitching his lips. This fellow Tian Bang was simply a scoundrel when he wasn't wearing a military uniform. All right. It seemed that Luo Nan really had never seen this brother wear a military uniform before. Perhaps this was some sort of self-awareness? We need to immediately engage in a non-interference conversation with researcher Li. What in the world do you guys want by bringing her here? The treatment room Huang Bingjin was in wasn't far from the police station. They arrived in the time it took to exchange a few words. However, some people arrived even earlier than them. The senior executive of the Rainbow Fund, who had gone to the police station to negotiate with He Yueyin, as well as the fund's professional legal officer, Lawyer Zhu, had returned. They appeared to be even more excited than before. It wasn't that the methods of Luo Nan and the others were infuriating. It was that there were other people here besides the two of them. Among them, the most important person was the general manager of Quantum Corporation's Sia City branch, Mr. Hu Yuli. This general manager whose luck hadn't been smooth recently. He had just been demoted and marginalized due to the human-faced arachnid incident. The two managers who had replaced him had gone on a vacation one after the other due to their own reasons. Hu Yuli had to take a salary far lower than before, and he had to do even worse work than before. Come on, he was just a high-level worker. He didn't possess any extraordinary powers, nor had he undergone any body modifications. What could he use to fight against a group of powerful people from the inner world? The resentment in General Manager whose heart was so deep that it piled up so much secondary energy that Luo Nan gave him a few extra glances. At this time, the always gloomy and cold Li Yiwei finally found a stage to perform on. Her expression changed quite a bit. She struggled. She resisted. She displayed an attitude of being unwilling to enter the treatment room. This gave Lawyer Zhu the best material. He had already become the main force of the assault. He used his wristband to crazily capture first-hand information while shouting loudly, "Look! Look! This is a threat. This is a crime. This is a Nazi concentration camp. You guys are pushing her into a gas chamber." How noisy. Luo Nan remembered that this Lawyer Zhu had been Yan Yongbua's lackey some time ago. He had once been together with Yan Yongbua to threaten him and his aunt's family. Luo Nan didn't expect that his master would still jump so much even though he had changed several times. This wasn't a problem that Luo Nan was concerned about. He just wanted to understand clearly from the upcoming confrontation. He wanted to know how Li Yiwei would react after seeing Huang Bingzhen, who was already half a mutant. Of course, the most important thing was still the monster that lived within her womb. How would she react? The problem was that Lawyer Zhu and his group were currently interfering with his research environment. Luo Nan was quite annoyed. Of course, Lawyer Zhu also noticed Luo Nan's group of people coming over. He still had a deep impression of the minor leading them. He had once researched the information on this youth named Luo Nan. It was back when Yan Yongbua was in charge of the Rainbow Fund. He had once tried to trap this youth and his family in a maelstrom of lawsuits, slowly torturing them. But he never expected that Yan Yongbua would be forced to take a vacation a few days later. There was no further development to this matter. They met again several months later. This youth's status had clearly undergone an earth-shattering change. Lawyer Zhu instinctively felt a bit guilty when he met Luo Nan's gaze. He subconsciously tilted his head. But that indescribably irritated gaze gave him a heavy punch, causing the pressure in his heart to suddenly increase. Fortunately, the main force wasn't him. It wasn't Hu Yuli either. Hu Yuli was the highest person in charge of Quantum Corporation in Sia City. He didn't take the lead even though he personally arrived. He just let Lawyer Zhu bark to create pressure and influence. They didn't hope to directly solve the problem from the legal level. Another 7 or 8 people came one after another as Lawyer Zhu sprayed his saliva. Some of them were people who had previously pressured the Sia City branch. Some of them were people who came to express the concern of power figures. Once the scale was about right, they would come up with a new routine. Mr. Luo, Vice President He. Oh, and Major General Tian. The manager of the Starry Sky Club, Madame Sun Jiari, arrived with a bitter smile. From her expression, it could be seen that Sun Jiari wasn't particularly fond of this assignment. Her words were quite cautious. She tried to display a neutral stance at the beginning. I've been entrusted by the organizers and co-organizers of Sia City's New Year's Eve feast to act as a coordinator. I hope that this matter involving Mrs. Li Yiwei can be resolved appropriately so that it won't cause any adverse effects. Regardless of the differences between everyone, we hope to be able to sit down and talk. We hope to communicate patiently. Bamboo Pole, who had just escorted Li Yiwei over, left a message in the mission channel. Look, Peony's statement has already been verified. Luo Nan sent a question mark. He Yiwei gave a simple explanation. There should be quite a few interested parties involved in this matter. Therefore, Quantum Corporation can't make a quick decision, so they naturally entered a conservative negotiation mode. This should be the result of many parties discussing and compromising. Bamboo Pole, you deal with it. As you command. Bamboo Pole didn't decline. He beamed as he stood at the entrance of the treatment room. He faced off against his old friend, We've never severed our communication channels. Of course, we won't stop investigating the case. Right now, we have conclusive evidence that proves that Mrs. Li Yiwei is closely related to the high-risk suspect who spread a certain virus. Therefore, we need her to confront the other person involved, Mr. Huang. This is a very serious process of investigating the case. It's two different matters from communication and explanation. The two can't contradict each other. Sun Jiayi tried to pull the two lines together, but they can also promote each other. Of course. Once we make progress in the case, we will need everyone's cooperation. We will continue to dig deeper for clues. When the time comes, we will certainly communicate with everyone one by one and be frank with everyone. The expressions of the surrounding people didn't look too good when these words were spoken. You're threatening me. This is a threat. Lawyer Zhu tried to assist Sun Jiayi. I said long ago that if you want to investigate the case, you must immediately show authorization from the police and security departments. Moreover, where are the police personnel? Where are the medical personnel? Your procedures are completely illegal. You're completely relying on force to carry out illegal imprisonment and interrogation. Sun Jiayi's brows furrowed. Could it be that she had deliberately pointed out Major General Tian, just to throw flirtatious glances at the blind? Lawyer Zhu was completely unaware of the dissatisfaction of his partner beside him. In his heart, he was bewildered with excitement. He felt that he had already found an excellent breakthrough. Mrs. Li Yiwei is right here. I request to immediately verify with her. When you forcibly took her away from the New Year's Eve party backstage, did you follow the relevant procedures? Before he could finish speaking, a long sigh interjected. Procedures? I find it strange. I, a Grand Major General of the Field Army, am here to assist Chief Luo and Vice President He in handling the case. But you, a large group of people are jumping up and down. In the end, you can't even find an influential professional bureaucrat or department head to support you. What's going on? Don't you have the slightest idea in your heart? Once these words were spoken, the outside of the treatment room seemed to freeze. The group of people were absolutely silent. Sun Jiayi secretly rolled her eyes. She simply watched with the cold eyes of a bystander. Relying on Lawyer Zhu's assistance, Tian Bang successfully used an AoE to clear the field. After stealing all the limelight, he turned his head and whispered to He Yuan, "You owe me a meal. How about we go to the high-altitude revolving restaurant to eat a little supper?" He Yuan didn't pay any attention to him. Luo Nan shot a glance over and didn't say anything. He didn't wait for Li Yiwei, who was still struggling, to walk straight into the treatment room. He didn't have any protection whatsoever. He Yuan, Tian Bang, and Zhang Yingying were all like this. As for the bodyguards, Qin Yikuan followed them inside. Gauda stood guard outside. The originally spacious treatment room was instantly filled by more than half. Bamboo Pole was still beaming as he stood at the door. We understand everyone's concerns very clearly. But please be at ease, everyone. We have obtained authorization from the relevant departments, and our actions have always been open and fair. We don't reject supervision. We have specially prepared some evidence and information for everyone. There are videos and test reports inside. They sufficiently prove that Ms. Li Yiwei is a major suspect in this matter. Everyone can go to the conference room on this floor to watch and examine. If you are worried about the confrontation itself, the treatment room itself is very transparent. You can see all the details through the glass. Everyone can even come inside to supervise. As long as you don't intentionally interfere with the process of the case, we absolutely won't say anything. No one actually responded for a time. It was unknown when a large space had been left empty outside the treatment room's door. Bamboo Pole wore a smile on his face as he invited Li Yiwei inside. Then he turned his head and winked at Sun Jiayi before saying, "Then I'll be closing the door." Chapter 670. It was finally quiet. Luo Nan's mood improved quite a bit after entering the treatment room. This fellow Tian Bang was annoying, but he was still quite useful. He was able to seize Lawyer Zhu's flaw and clear the scene in one fell swoop. The pressure he exerted on that fellow in secret was not in vain. Luo Nan was finally able to see some clues from the structure of the group on the mental plane from the words He Yuan and Bamboo Pole had said. They were outwardly strong but inwardly weak. They were cowardly and overcautious. They weren't even comparable to a tortoise shell. At best, they were like a pillowcase filled with self-deceiving fine feathers. They would transform into other shapes with the slightest bit of external stimulation. On the other hand, Sun Jiari didn't stir on the mental plane. She was like a deep pool, like cold ice. Her bottom couldn't be seen at a glance. She was truly a ruthless character. Luo Nan only went through the structure of the mental plane once in his mind before he was quickly pushed into a corner. Luo Nan's most important mission right now was to verify the fundamental functions of the parasitic mutant within Li Yiwei's womb. He needed to find out if this object was the same model as the one 2,000 kilometers away. He needed to dig out the internal connections and background. He needed to place concrete evidence before everyone. However, the first thing Luo Nan sensed here was not the immediate state of Li Yiwei or Huang Bingzhen. Instead, he sensed an extra aura within the shadows. The aura penetrated through the wall and then stopped in the shadows of the corner. It was clearly within reach, but all the ability users, including Tianbang and He Yueyin, were completely unaware of it. Rue Wan had returned and informed Luo Nan on the mental plane. Actually, Luo Nan didn't need Rue Wan to tell him. He had already sensed the special existence of the Jin Tong Soul Light Seed. I've already retrieved it. With a thought, the rapidly shrinking spatial distance caused the Jin Tong Soul Light Seed to produce an unprecedented restlessness. This was reflected in the virtual brain system interface. The two elements, the Soul Light Seed and the biochemical reactor, seemed to be loading something into their respective interfaces. The closer the distance, the more interesting the reaction. Then what would happen if they made substantial contact? Luo Nan was already impatient, but things needed to be done step by step. Li Yiwei had already been brought into the treatment room. She no longer engaged in pointless struggles. She just used her usual gloomy gaze to sweep across the faces of Luo Nan and the others. She seemed to be assessing the current situation. Perhaps it was because of the intense movements earlier. Her face was slightly red. From Luo Nan's perspective, the flow of this woman's blood and energy, the secretion of glands, and the conduction of nerve signals were much more frequent and vivid than normal. The fluctuations on the mental plane were much more distinct. From the looks of it, this was a very logical change. Luo Nan's gaze swept up and down. In the end, he laughed and took the initiative to speak to Li Yiwei. Is it the master or is it the host? There's no harm in proving it. In just a few words, there must be words that made Li Yiwei's heart throb. Her eyelids twitched a little, and she replied in a hoarse voice, I don't understand what you're saying. I don't care what you say. The simple conversation between the two attracted the attention of the others present. Everyone looked over curiously, but no one said a word. Bamboo Pole, who was the last to enter, winked at Zhang Yingying. The boss must have opened another line of logic. The latter pursed his lips. I hope they can understand. Actually, Luo Nan already understood by now. It was just as he said. He didn't care what Li Yiwei said. The so-called confrontation had always been just a pretext. He didn't need Li Yiwei and Huang Bingzhen to communicate verbally. They didn't even need to have any concrete contact. This was because the connection between the two had been established the moment Li Yiwei stepped into the treatment room. Under the detection mechanism of the external neuron, a dazzling signal light lit up in the treatment room at this time. There were 4 kinds of raw materials for the advanced formula distributed in the air. These raw materials all came from Huang Bingzhen, who was in the process of the mutation. And 2 of them were components that didn't exist in the warehouse of the harvester within Li Yiwei's body. Luo Nan was incomparably certain of this with the relevant list of information from the virtual brain system. In a formal sense, Huang Bingzhen's degree of infection exceeded that of the military hero 2,000 kilometers away. But due to its recessive characteristics, perhaps it was the result of Luo Nan's guidance. His symptoms were much lighter than that of the hero 2,000 kilometers away. He didn't cough up blood. He didn't have any obvious internal or external injuries. It was just that the mutation had sucked away too much of his body's energy. The hospital only used all sorts of catheters to inject nutrients that could maintain his vital signs. The treatment room didn't have a sterile tent set up, so the components produced by the mutation were like spores that were hard to see with the naked eye. They drifted all over the room. They didn't directly react with normal people. The self-format of ability users possessed a certain degree of defensive and repulsive power against them. But Li Yiwei was different. At the very least, the parasitic mutant within her body had already begun to move. The fine blood vessels and nerves within the monster became extremely excited. The frequency and amplitude of their pulsations increased, and a change occurred in its structure. The series of fluctuations produced by the monster's body passed through the breeding room and magnified it. Then it was monitored and combed by the virtual brain system. It was roughly restored to a set of dynamic images with a clear center and a blurry surroundings. Luo Nan had already grasped the corresponding state within the reaction furnace. But outside the reaction furnace, within Li Yiwei's subcutaneous tissues, the abnormal activity in this region was limited by the precision of his senses. Luo Nan couldn't see it too clearly, but he could indirectly confirm it. It affected the changes in Li Yiwei's physiological and mental state as a whole. It was clear that the parasitic monster's infiltration of Li Yiwei had already reached an extremely deep degree. Perhaps it had already extended through the blood vessels and nerves, directly reaching the lowest level of emotional instincts. It wasn't just a simple uterine fibroid. Its camouflage under normal conditions was quite amazing. It was able to completely hide from all kinds of high-end detection equipment. But under the current special environment, they didn't have the slightest intention of concealing their intentions within the surface region of the body. They directly restored their true appearance, collecting and transmitting probes and soft tubes. Even though Li Yiwei stood near the outer region of the treatment room, she was still 7 or 8 meters away from Huang Bingjin's bed. But there seemed to be some sort of incorporeal magnetic force on her body that specifically targeted those fluttering spores. Her snow-white shirt soon attracted large amounts of floating matter that were hard to see with the naked eye. And the probes that extended out from the pores on the surface of her body behaved exactly the same as their counterparts 2,000 kilometers away. They were all separated by her white shirt, wantonly collecting and devouring these raw material carriers. Then they were transported through the corresponding channels back to the reaction furnace within Li Yiwei's womb. Luo Nan couldn't see the lens from 2,000 kilometers away due to the monitoring of the virtual brain system. It was clearly displayed here. Within a short span of 3 to 5 seconds, the corresponding components were transported through the blood vessels and nerves into the culture room. They were classified and stored in the corresponding vesicles, and the storage was endlessly increased. Though there were thousands of channels, there wasn't the slightest bit of chaos. This was the center of the parasitic monster within the remains of the biochemical reaction furnace. It was a collection, refinement, classification, and storage system that operated at high speeds. The established facts confirmed that Luo Nan's conjecture wasn't wrong. Li Yiwei here, and the medical worker 2,000 kilometers away, had such a system implanted within their bodies. And at this time, a crucial question emerged. Luo Nan wanted to ask, do you know about the parasitic monster within your bodies? Do you know the true function of the parasitic monster? Do you have any control over it? Li Yiwei was already nervous on the mental plane. Under these circumstances, what a normal person should do the most was to conceal. Conceal her emotions. Conceal all of her small movements that would lead to her being exposed. It must be known that Li Yiwei was currently a detained suspect. Everyone within this treatment room was eyeing her like a tiger watching its prey. Luo Nan was a master of perception. He Yueyin and Tian Bang were elite burners. Bamboo Pole was a B-rank psychic. The 5 senses and 6 senses of this group of people far exceeded common sense. It could be said that this was the most dangerous area for Li Yiwei. There was no other. Yet the system within Li Yiwei's womb did not stop collecting even in this state. Yes, there was no concealment whatsoever. This system simply didn't care about the host's current circumstances. It did what it needed to do. It was completely at odds with the host's emotions and circumstances. Luo Nan couldn't help but suspect that as the host, Li Yiwei, not only lacked control over the parasitic monster that hid within her vital organs, but she didn't even have enough basic perceptual abilities. Don't you feel that there's something wrong with the smell? Tian Bang suddenly spoke. Soon his gaze focused on Li Yiwei's body. His eyes were filled with layers of suspicion. Sure enough, the matters of the world couldn't withstand nagging. The perceptual sensitivity of this world's apex burner was far beyond that of an ordinary person. He quickly detected the minute abnormality. However, everyone's gazes turned to Luo Nan when Tian Bang opened his mouth. Soon, even Tian Bang did the same. After all, Luo Nan was the one who put forward this proposal. He was also publicly recognized as the apex master of perception in this world. Most importantly, Everyone could see that. Perhaps Luo Nan had already made up his mind. There really is a problem. This was probably the most ideal situation that Luo Nan could think of. He also felt that this was an excellent opportunity to break down Li Yiwei's mental defenses. Mrs. Li. Researcher Li. I want to ask you. Do you feel that there's a region within your body? A region that doesn't belong to you. It's especially restless? Luo Nan imitated a few postures he learned from movies and began a deliberately mystifying performance. His acting skills were hopeless, but reality was unbreakable. Li Yiwei's face went rigid in an instant. Correspondingly, great waves rolled over and over on the mental plane. It was hard to stop. This was a situation that had never occurred since the confrontation of the interrogation. Everyone's gazes turned over in unison. But even in such a situation, the collection and storage system continued to operate steadily. This automated collection device undoubtedly treated its own functions as the highest authority. The life and death of the host were not within the scope of its consideration. This also confirmed that even though Li Yiwei had a bit of understanding towards the existence of the system, his control over it was pitifully weak. Zhang Yingying went, Not too long ago, she had brought Li Yiwei to the hospital for a full set of examinations. She was exceptionally shocked by this result. Within your body? Where? In the end, Luo Nan's acting skills were terrible. He deliberately wanted to be deliberately mystifying, but he was a bit unable to grasp the situation. He just bluntly said, the inside of the uterus. That's sarcoma. You can't be treating it as a uterine fibroid, right? Li Yiwei's expression suddenly changed. But Luo Nan's expression also changed at this moment. This was because a system message clearly flashed on the virtual brain interface. Chapter 671. Only Luo Nan could see the information of the virtual brain system. The external state of affairs continued to proceed according to the established tempo. Her greatest secret was directly exposed by Luo Nan, and Li Yiwei instinctively retreated. Her feet staggered a bit, reflecting the fact that she lacked extraordinary strength. But as she retreated, the intensity of her emotions skyrocketed, quickly surpassing a certain threshold. Perhaps it was this stimulation that stimulated the natural secretion of the human body. The corresponding hormones passed through specific neurons to generate specific nerve signals that were transmitted all the way to the parasitic mutant. The sarcoma within the uterus began a new round of wriggling. This action did not correspond with the main function of collecting and storing. It was truly a stress response to the external situation. Luo Nan confirmed from this that Li Yiwei had a certain degree of control over the sarcoma. Under the stimulation, a portion of the sarcoma's stored energy was stimulated. Some of the vesicles within the incubation room ruptured, sending some special substances stored within them through the dense blood vessels and nerves that ran through the parasitic monster and the host to all parts of the body. This was similar to the effects of drug stimulation and backup batteries, and the external changes were truly astonishing. Li Yiwei's pale skin darkened in the time it took to take a breath. There were some changes in the structure of her muscles as well. The transformation process did not happen overnight, but the eyes of most people in the treatment room lit up at the same time. Zhang Yingying had already cried out, Pharmacist! Wasn't this the true suspect that they had been unable to find all this time? Even if it was just an embryonic form. Bamboo Pole immediately reminded, Restrain her! Be careful of the drugs. He Yuan didn't say a word. Her figure charged forward. She had the highest position aside from Luo Nan, but as a burner proficient in close combat, there was no one more suitable than her to make a move. Luo Nan, who was forcefully blocked by Qin Yikuan, yelled at this time, Don't! He Yuan was startled, but she soon realized that these words were not directed at her. Li Yiwei's footsteps became even more chaotic as she continued to retreat. The round of drug stimulation and charging under her control did not bring about the power to save her. On the contrary, as the corresponding substances passed through the blood vessels and nerves connecting her and the parasitic monster in large doses, the terrible negative effects rapidly spread out. Another round of wriggling appeared within the sarcoma within the uterus. This was completely an instinctive convulsion. At this moment, the parasitic monster was like a slug that had been poured with too much salt. It rapidly lost its energy and vitality and began to shrink rapidly. The atrophy was comprehensive, including the main body that was parasitized in the remains of the biochemical reactor, as well as all the blood vessels and nerves that spread out. Those probes and tubes were originally its most important tentacle tools, but in the blink of an eye, they had entered an irreversible process of destruction. Because they were highly substitutes for Li Yiwei's veins and neural networks, their atrophy represented the atrophy or even dissolution of Li Yiwei's veins and neural networks. Li Yiwei finally understood the terrible situation of her family. She could no longer maintain the gloominess and indifference on her face, but she was facing paralysis and distortion. Ironically, she still did not know the source of the disaster. "What did you do to me?" The shrill voice that was originally suppressed in his throat turned into a hissing sound of air leaking. In the time it took to finish the sentence, Li Yiwei's entire body collapsed. His skin shriveled and his muscles curled as if he had instantly lost half of his body weight. Even his eyeballs had sunk into 2 empty holes. People's cries of alarm could be heard from outside the treatment room. The impact of the sudden change in the situation was too much for these people to handle. "Get back!" Tianbang. He Yuan barked an order. She herself didn't retreat, but instead advanced. She took a step forward, and in the blink of an eye, she was face to face with Li Yiwei. A blazing white flame burst forth between the two. Her fist bombarded Li Yiwei's lower abdomen, and the format of fire penetrated her body. Li Yiwei fell backwards. Luo Nan could see that He Yuan's attack wasn't purely for the sake of knocking Li Yiwei down. Instead, she used the special nature of the format of fire to forcefully interrupt the negative effects within Li Yiwei's body, preventing her from dying in the first instance. After this attack, He Yuan took advantage of the situation to grab Li Yiwei and lay her flat on the ground. Tianbang shook his head from behind as he followed. He didn't say much, but his fist smashed down in the same manner, striking Li Yiwei's chest. Tianbang's attitude looked quite casual, but the power of his fist's transformation was exquisite to the extreme. The tip of his fist blazed with the format of fire in the beginning, harmonizing with He Yuan's energy. They connected seamlessly, not causing any conflict. Midway, however, it transformed into a thin layer of bloody light. It should be some sort of stimulating secret technique that was forcefully applied to Li Yiwei's body. Looking at the target of the secret technique, it should be the path of the blood flame order. 2 apex burners worked together to save Li Yiwei's life. Their reaction speed and level of tacit understanding far surpassed everyone else present. Bamboo Pole and Zhang Yingying reacted as well. They contacted the hospital, allowing their medical personnel to quickly arrive. Luo Nan stared fixedly at the busy scene in front of him. He didn't say a word or move. Luo Nan had a complete grasp of the changes within Li Yiwei's body through the virtual brain system the moment this unforeseen event occurred. He knew the root cause of all this, but this didn't mean that he was able to interfere and reverse it. He knew the chemical formula of the special substance that had already spread throughout Li Yiwei's body, but he didn't understand why such an intense and fatal reaction would occur with the parasitic monster, let alone a solution. In terms of pure adaptability, there was an enormous disparity between him and these 2 professionals. Luo Nan didn't have the time to feel ashamed. The thoughts in his mind revolved completely around the self-destruct program. They spun crazily, forming a clamorous maelstrom. In his perception domain, the part of the virtual brain interface changed rapidly and directly. The elemental analysis interface of the night-level basic biochemical reactor had already turned to ash. Any loading progress was meaningless. Another 2 seconds passed, and this new element, which had just been incorporated into the virtual brain system not too long ago, completely disappeared. All it left behind was a rather sarcastic system message. The self-destruct program has been successfully rebooted. The biochemical contamination crisis has been resolved. Luo Nan still didn't understand why the self-destruct program had inexplicably rebooted. For the time being, he didn't want to waste his brain power to ponder over these details. He just came to a realization. No wonder the manipulator behind the scenes allowed the parasitic monster to wantonly gather the required substance. The manipulator didn't feel that the method of warping and changing the host's blood vessels, nerves, and hair was sufficiently hidden. Instead, there was a ruthless and decisive method to cover it up. With Li Yiwei's current situation, her nervous system and blood circulation system had suffered fatal damage. Even if the manipulator used every method possible to preserve her life, it would be very difficult to restore her brain structure, which was already in a complete mess. Even if a miracle occurred and some of her consciousness was preserved, it would be impossible to dig out secrets that she didn't know. From the manipulator behind the scenes, this was a near-perfect silencing attempt. The manipulator had considered the relevant circumstances from the very beginning, and it had done a complete program design. Luonan felt stifled to the point where his heart ached. If the manipulator really was like Luo Yuan back then, using the mutant lair and the planar crossbow as the foundation to carry out a heaven-shaking, forceful slaughter, then Luonan would have accepted it. But what the hell was going on? He couldn't accept this result, and he especially couldn't swallow this bitter fruit. He had to do something. He had to do something no matter what. Luonan pursed his lips, suddenly turned around, and walked out of the treatment room with large strides. Lawyer Zhu barked as soon as he opened the door. He couldn't touch Luonan with Qin Yikuan and Gao De blocking him, but there was no need for him to. Lawyer Zhu's face contorted from extreme excitement. This is your verification. A terrible design, a terrible program, a terrible result. I've already recorded everything. I'll be sending it to the security department immediately. You guys have the authority, right? This is dereliction of duty, a crime. He Yuan stopped what she was doing when she noticed the situation. She walked over with quick steps, and someone else spoke up at this time. Mr. Luo, and Vice President He. You guys must give us an explanation. The surprise on Hu Yuli's face hadn't faded yet, but he had already suppressed the fluctuations of his emotions and seized the high ground. Perhaps the people present were lacking in talents who could truly accomplish things, but no one was an idiot. Aside from Sun Jiari, who stood to the side with her arms crossed and the cold eyes of a bystander, the others scrambled to express their dissatisfaction for a time. What did you guys do to Mrs. Li? You directly knocked her down. We just said that this is a danger zone, and you guys pushed her in. What do you have to say now? It doesn't matter if Mrs. Li Yiwei is a suspect or not. Is this how you treat suspects? I just heard Mrs. Li's words. You guys did something to her. Willful and reckless. Do whatever you want. Buzzing noises arose, seeming to be endless. It thwarted the emotions and willpower of the people. He Yuan didn't speak for the time being. She didn't care how these people tossed and turned. She just went to look at Luonan's situation. Luonan's head was slightly lowered. His face just happened to be hidden in the shadow behind God's shoulder. It was impossible to see what he looked like. He Yuan's brows furrowed. She was just about to control the situation when her body suddenly trembled. Crack, crack. It was as if thunder had exploded beside her ears, giving rise to countless cries of alarm. And at the same time, the lights in this area flickered and then turned completely dark. Even the surrounding emergency lights weren't able to be turned on. The darkness caused the cries of alarm to rapidly magnify. Even the sound of thunder was suppressed. But upon closer inspection, where was the sound of thunder? The air was completely filled with chaotic and disorderly sound waves. Not a single wave possessed the corresponding tension. Only He Yuan and the other ability users knew that their ears and eyes were in such disarray. There was never any sound of thunder. There was only that explosive attack on the mental plane. The electrical system recovered quickly from the chaos, but when the lights lit up one after another, a wave of startled cries arose. Under the illumination of the lights, the glass walls of the isolation treatment room and the corridor were covered with spider-web-like cracks. It was as if someone had used a giant hammer to smash them a dozen times in the short period of darkness. The direct destructive power had created a direct oppressive force. All noises were erased from the corridor outside the treatment room. The group of people were deathly silent. A rotten pillow stuffed with grass stalks and feathers would still hurt when smashed into the face. Then it would be better to just shatter it. Luonan didn't say a word. He pushed aside Qin Yikuan in front of him and directly left. The surrounding air was clearly warping around his body. Upon closer inspection, it was the phenomenon of water vapor abnormally gathering and refracting light. To be more specific, it was the aftermath of a terrifying soul strength using Luonan's fleshly body as a medium to forcefully interfere with the material plane. The people present might not necessarily be able to understand the problem of supernatural powers, but they all knew where the silent thunder came from when they saw this scene. But so what if they knew? From beginning to end, Luonan's gaze didn't glance at their faces, not even a sliver. But there was clearly a malevolent and terrifying demon within the warped air. It transformed and morphed, seeming as if it could penetrate into their hearts at any time. This is a threat. A gangster-like threat. Lawyer Zhu relied on his overly excited mental state to be the first to break the silence. But he didn't know that his voice was like a chick that had just been cut with a knife. It was crackling with noise. Chapter 672. In a certain room on the 177th floor of Aurora Cloud City. A few seconds ago, the power supply system was inexplicably unstable. The lights flickered, and a fine crackling sound could be heard in the air. It was as if small bubbles were popping one by one. Soon, the illusory barrier erected within the room really did shatter. The two priests of the Order of Justice suddenly stood up, and the Ablatum Knight standing guard outside the door charged in with nervous expressions. They thought that some unforeseen event had occurred within the room. The two sides looked at each other in dismay. 2 seconds passed, and Li Taixing's face turned ashen. He shouted into the air, "Luo Nan, what the hell are you doing?" These words came without rhyme or reason, but everyone present was an ability user. They could all understand what he meant. Right now, the area was pervaded with thundercloud-like soul strength. It formed an incorporeal oppressive force. It was like lightning and fire that could tear apart the void at any time. It was on the verge of erupting, only flickering behind the clouds. However, it could take lives at any time. It truly made one's nerves taut. There weren't many people in Xia City who could create such a scene. Forget it. This was all nonsense. The person over there was clearly displaying the characteristics of his aura. It was absolutely Luo Nan, who they had just met tonight. There was no doubt about it. Li Taixing had just been discussing with Zhang Xiao how to get rid of this fellow who threatened the foundation of the Order of Justice. He could not help but be nervous when he suddenly encountered such a situation. He thought that the matter had been exposed, and that person had come to kill them. However, there was no reply for a long time after he shouted. This was quite awkward. Zhang Xiao, who was beside Luo Nan, had an additional thought. He felt that the thundercloud on the mental plane had an oppressive range that was a bit too broad, and it lacked a bit of a target. Investigate what's going on. People of their level never lacked information channels. Plus, the Order of Justice had operated in Xia City for several decades. It was not for naught. Even though the Xia City branch and the military and political departments were still working on secrecy, Luo Nan's 2-hour itinerary was displayed before their eyes in a few short minutes. In other words, that person also, wants to vent? Soon, Li Taixing and Zhang Xiao knew the ins and outs of the matter. Actually, it was not complicated. It was just a young man who wanted to resolve his frustrations after encountering a setback. Other people would curse and swear, but he would directly sweep them on the mental plane. In other words, the mental thundercloud that was still surging in the surroundings was not targeted by Luo Nan? This made things even more awkward. After figuring it out, Li Taixing's face alternated between red and white. Upon seeing this, Zhang Xiao hurriedly dismissed the Ablatum Knights from the room. When he turned his head and saw that Li Taixing wanted to say something out of anger again, he quickly gestured to stop him. He pointed at his wristband and sent a message through the internal encrypted channel. Luo Nan is venting his anger after losing face. Let's just watch the fun. There's no need to divert the pressure for the sake of some unrelated people. Furthermore, with this node and this plan we have to be careful. The color on Li Taixing's face wouldn't disappear for a while. He knew that Zhang Xiao was speaking the truth. When faced with a master of perception who could let go of himself, within the range of his mental perception, it was best to be more cautious if he didn't want to be stripped naked. But he also knew that he was still King Coward. He was a dignified first ablatum of the Order of Justice, yet he was being forced to use a secret channel while speaking in his own room. Wouldn't he become a huge joke if word of this got out? Li Taixing had always been a proud and arrogant person. The negotiations that he had deliberately messed up in the past few years were probably more than the deals that others had made in their entire lives. The reasoning was reasonable, but he was unable to swallow this anger. Zhang Xiao could see that Li Taixing was a bit mentally unbalanced right now. Half of it was because he had lost face due to his earlier misjudgment. Half of it was because he was being suppressed to the point of being sullen. In the end, it was because of the continuous oppressive effects of the thundercloud on the mental plane. Hiss. We've been talking for quite some time now. Why doesn't Luonan stop? Zhang Xiao grasped the most essential problem. The oppressive power of the formless and soundless thundercloud might have been a bit lower than before, but it lingered in the void from beginning to end. It maintained a faintly discernible interference with the material plane. Not just ability users like them, but even some normal people who were more sensitive would have their minds stifled at this time. Their breaths would be uneven. Was this kid crazy? Moreover, this was an enormous consumption. Wang Xiao attempted to make a quantitative analysis. We can feel it even from here. I'm afraid that the entire aurora cloud has been enveloped by it. Li Taixing did not respond, but the calculations in his mind never stopped. He speculated that his strength among the group of first oblatums of the Order of Justice could not compare to the several powerful extraordinaries, but he was still in the upper echelons. He was a B-rank psychic, and he had the blessing of the Order system. He could go anywhere in the world. However, if he were to be placed in Luonan's current position and learn from Luonan, he would not even be able to expand the range of his perception, let alone exert pressure on the material plane. Was Luonan, this fellow, really someone who was born with knowledge? Or did the original version of formatting theory possess unimaginable advantages? Or perhaps the gate of truth? While Li Taixing's mind was in a mess, Zhang Zhao's quantitative analysis process was delayed after he integrated the information from all sides. He hesitated for a moment before speaking. First oblatum Li. According to the latest intelligence, it's not just Aurora Cloud City. I'm afraid the entire Cloud City Water Village area has been affected. What do you mean? Up until now, there have been large-scale failures in the power and wireless communications of this area. It's said that the electromagnetic radiation has exceeded the limit. But the source of the radiation I think it should be. Wang Xiao did not finish speaking, and Li Taixing did not rush him. He actually did not speak for a few seconds. Li Taixing was silent for a long time before he simply took action himself. He used the secret technique of the Order of Justice to probe and grasp the current situation of the surrounding area. Zhang Xiao silently assisted him. The results of the measurement on the mental plane needed to be determined and grasped by Luonan himself. Zhang Xiao did not know what Li Taixing's conclusion was. His own opinion was, the hearts of men wavered. There was an emotion known as fear that was slowly but continuously growing in the area that he could sense. He was unable to grasp the finer details, but the general nature was like the silent and overflowing lake water under the autumn rain. It really was lake water. Zhang Xiao pinched his eyebrows. This was like a giant beast suddenly appearing on the calm and tranquil surface of a lake, bringing with it raging waves. Even if the beast quickly dived back down and the surface of the lake recovered its tranquility, the lake water would no longer give off the same feeling as before. In the past, many people did not know what Luonan, a master of perception, could do. Luonan appeared more as a theorist. But from this New Year's Eve onward, everyone had to revise their impressions. They had to consider how the existence of Luonan would affect their past habits. I will contact the first oblatum and ask for guidance on the next step. Li Taixing spoke in the secret channel. It was practically the same as pushing aside his previous considerations and starting all over again. Zhang Xiao lowered his eyebrows and responded in a low voice. There was no doubt that Li Taixing's actions were the triumph of reason over emotion. But looking at it from another angle, wasn't it the triumph of fear over dignity? Perhaps from this moment on, the various powers on Earth would have no choice but to treat the giant beast hidden under the water as one of the greatest variables and incorporate it into their models. While the two first oblatums of the Order of Justice were having a nervous breakdown from the underwater giant beast, the giant beast was sitting behind the office desk with his elbows propped up on his elbows. Luonan began to get used to this posture. His 10 fingers were crossed, and his mouth and nose were covered. Only half of his face could be seen. His eyelids were drooping, and his face was expressionless. He could block off many external spying and observation. He maintained his silence. He did not speak nor move. But the distorted rays of light around his body made this silence not very convincing. No one knew what Luonan's intentions were in the end. Bamboo Pole and Zhang Yingying were the first to chase after Luonan, but they were pushed outside by the low pressure in the room. He Yuan hurried over after dealing with the relevant matters. And at this time, intelligence from all directions of Cloud City Water Village came flying in like snowflakes, piling up layer upon layer. This description was extremely appropriate. Not only was the amount of intelligence, but it was highly homogeneous. All of it was related to a certain person's intense venting. By the time the Psychic Wave Network technical maintenance team had sent an inquiry and provided a series of data on the decline of the interference rate of the Psychic Wave Network, the situation was already on the verge of spiraling out of control. Zhang Yingying and Bamboo Pole looked at each other in dismay. On one hand, they didn't know how to mediate the situation. On the other hand, they were thoroughly frightened by the terrifying power that Luo Nan displayed. He Yuan spoke softly at this time. Everyone, don't wait here. Let him calm down. Although the plan failed, the opponent was forced to be ruthless and cut off the relevant clues. This proves that the direction is correct. Whether or not there is proof is no longer important. Bamboo Pole chuckled twice. Isn't it good for you to speak so bluntly? The path of diplomacy has always been like this. Frankly speaking, this kind of result makes me breathe a sigh of relief. Aha! Right now, the opponent isn't prepared, and we aren't prepared either. If we really were to break through the secret like a hot knife through butter and shed all pretenses of cordiality with the opponent, I'm afraid that President Ouyang and Her Majesty Empress Wu would think twice. In terms of pure negotiation, we are undoubtedly the ones with the initiative. Luo Nan obviously heard He Yuan's voice from outside. Nominally, He Yuan was discussing with Bamboo Pole and Zhang Yingying, but Luo Nan was very clear about her actual intentions. But he still didn't react. He just sat quietly behind the office desk until He Yuan sent Bamboo Pole and Zhang Yingying away. She herself also quietly left, leaving only Qin Yikuan and Gao Da to guard the door. Only now did Luo Nan loosen his fingers. His mouth and nose felt a bit hot. Traces of blood seeped out from his nostrils. He casually pulled out a tissue and wiped it away. The round of explosion just now had forcefully interfered with the material plane with his soul strength. The god gear and the body gear fiercely rubbed against each other, to the point that some tiny blood vessels were unable to withstand the powerful pressure. They ruptured and bled. But this was nothing. In the few seconds of explosion just now, the power radiation of the interference force definitely exceeded 20 kilowatts. In fact, Luo Nan didn't have enough confidence in his modified structure. For the sake of guaranteeing the radiation power, the output was probably over 10 times greater. Even now, he maintained a power output of 20 kilowatts, allowing the interference wave formed by him and the external neuron to cross a distance of 2,000 kilometers under the guidance of the Soul Cloak in an attempt to connect with the target. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.